get a ride in from your boat? Did you get a ride in from your boat?
The one sitting out there.
I should be able to buy that after.
Oh, that one.
Yeah,
I thought you meant the cruise ship.
supposedly that yacht is worth 50 yacht.
Yeah, that's a I wouldn't be able to afford a down payment if I work like 1,000 years.
So they come into town?
Yes.
Looks like they're hanging out, waiting for a spot till the cruise ship leaves and they can go back in, I assume.
No, I think they have been here and they must have left because I thought they had docked earlier.
They're either coming through, they just came through, or they're going through the Northwest Passage.
So,
Wow. Jeez. Sounds like a long, pretty cool trip.
Most of these boats this time of year, usually if they're this time of year, they're waiting for the ice to go through. Usually we just would see sailboats, primarily sailboats. Now you're seeing cruise ships and yachts. Remember that guy that came through here in the Zodiac? He went through the Northwest Passage in the Zodiac.
Oh my God.
And he had it's not a normal Zodiac. It had I think there were 4 300 horsepower each outboards on it.
Wow.
It was basically a floating gas tank is what it was.
Roland Trowbridge?
No, it wasn't. It was, I don't know, 50 years ago, and it was just specially built. But the whole hull was nothing but a bladder filled with gasoline.
Roland
John, or
ended
you
up
on
here.
On any of these things?
Mud utility.
Yeah, I think that little Zodiac could go like 80 miles an hour. It was ridiculous.
Okay.
I'm on utility.
All right, thank
Pretty
you.
cool though.
That sounds pretty cool.
Okay, John's on his way. So,
Is that who we're waiting on for?
well, I mean, we're waiting on
Yeah, that's the big topic, right?
others, but you know,
Talking about that out here.
Scary.
well, you don't need it as we really don't need a quorum for a work session, but we were hoping everybody would be here. I know I think Doug may be tied up on the cruise. Has the other cruise ship left?
No, they're still in. We filled it today.
I don't know.
Not filled. Yeah, they're still there. I think they're supposed to leave at
It's been out here for
1,800 or 2,800.
They must be loaded by now. You're going to leave it.
It was basically gas and go.
John Handelman.
much out of it?
That pizza good?
Mm-hmm.
They got moonshine in that jar?
It's gonna tell us.
Well, one of you has now been volunteering to get the meeting started.
Seniority rules.
They're producing.
We'll get this work session started.
Where's your cane? You got your cane?
No, I left it at home. Yeah, everybody's been asking.
It's cool, man. It's cool. It's your trademark.
Yeah. So we'll start the work session at 5:38. We don't need roll call or anything. Mr. City Manager, you want to introduce folks and we can.
Well, I'm going
Get
to let
rolling.
Ron, everybody kind of knows each other, but Ron, we have representatives from ADEC on the phone to talk about the closure of the new Gold House remedial action plan tonight. But I've been referring to as Nova Gold since Nova really owns the property and the liabilities that come with that, so.
Do.
And this is, the city is also, as I mentioned in my message to you, is part owner of the site, where, behind the rec center and where the Foster building is, and portions of that site at the Richard Foster have already been remediated, which allow for the construction of the building. And then Larry Peterson is here to represent the other owner of a portion of that property, Bering Strait Native Corporation. And, you know, the approach that we have taken is that all three parties work together and bring closure, and there's going to be some land use decisions that have to be made or approved. So is that a sufficient enough introduction, Ron?
Sure. So yeah, let me introduce myself real quick, if that's okay. So I've been the VP of Environment, Health, Safety, Sustainability for Nome Gold since the end of 2010. So been involved in projects here, including, you know, the transition, the sale of, we'll talk about that, Alaska Gold Company and the former New Gold House site since then. I have our contractor for as long as I've been working on it is Phil Welker from Geoengineers. So he does a lot of the actual work. So he's going to be one to talk a lot about the site characterization work and our proposed remedial action out there. So I don't know, Phil, do you want to add anything on your end?
I think you've done a great introduction for me, Ron. Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question? Are we gonna have to approve something? Is that where we're doing this? Is just for informational purposes, or?
This is for informational purposes right now. There's no action to be taken tonight on anything.
So maybe down the road? I didn't know.
It could be. I'm not sure. It depends on what ADEC tells us.
So we have two folks on the line from Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation. Laura, Janice, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, I can start. My name is Janice Wiegers, and I work for the Contaminated Sites Program with ADEC in Fairbanks. We oversee contaminated sites all over Alaska, and some happen to be in Nome. Yeah, we've been working with Ron on characterizing this area and reviewing his plans, and so we're basically here just to listen to the information that he provides you and answer questions if anybody has questions of us.
I guess, Scott, if you want to go to the very end of the presentation, it's going to talk about next steps. So
I was just curious,
you know,
at the beginning, just to see if we were gonna have to actually be taking an action,
not tonight.
not tonight, but maybe later.
Well, it depends on what it comes out in
Orders or-
logistics and whatever we may need to do.
And I would like to mention Laura Jacobs is also on the phone. She works with me at the DEC and is the project manager from our end of things.
And I will also just note, Larry, who you all know, we've known Larry for more than a decade. Our intent is to have the work in terms of, we'll talk about installing this remedial action be done in collaboration with the folks at Bering Strait. So all the work, construction work would be done by them. We would locally source the material. So it works out very well with us, and we have a very good relationship with them also. And as Glenn pointed out, they have an adjacent site there that did, and we'll talk about, go along with the, transfer of the Alaska Gold Company assets. So, the city, Bering Straits, and us have all coordinated because as adjacent sites, we're all kind of together as part of this. So we have a presentation where we're going to go through. Please feel free to ask questions. Some of this is pretty technical. If you have questions for us, please ask them. If Janice and Laura, if you have questions about the state's program, please I will offer to ask them also as part of it. We did bring a copy of the design plans that have been approved by DEC for our remedial action. We're still working through a few final details. We have a draft monitoring plan into DEC. We have kind of the long-term post-closure plan. So we continue to monitor there. That we've not come to a final. I think we've got the basic components of it, but we have not gotten a final approval yet. So we're still working through that as part of the process. But if we want, we can go to the start of the presentation.
Laura is got her hand up.
Yeah, hi, this is Laura Jacobs. I just wanted to share that the review and approval not only happens through contaminated sites, but also solid waste. Solid waste rules have importance in this particular situation because it's a capped, essentially, pile of contaminated soils. So their regulations will also apply in this situation, but unfortunately, solid waste staff weren't able to join us tonight.
And the last thing that we, just to add is that, and, Glenn and I talked about this, and this was DEC. We've always talked about having an opportunity for local input and comment on this. We are prepared to go forward with this remedial action, but we wanted to provide a step whereby, and it's up to you in terms of what there. As far as I understand, there's no formal action required, but certainly it's something the city can consider in that aspect of it. So that's why we talked about what's the best way to get local input offered up to the public, and this seemed like the best forum to be able to do that.
So, so all we're really talking about at this time is the area down the hill, the former new Gold House site. We're not talking about up the hill where the truck shop or any of the shop buildings or any of that are, correct?
That is correct.
Plan. Okay, thanks.
So this site is within city-owned limits, right?
Yeah.
And does this project require city approval because it's within city limits?
We have some responsibility for our site, and I really want Ron to make the presentation before we start.
Okay.
But that was the purpose, to see whether you were comfortable. Larry has been doing some improvements that were requested by ADEC. We're going to have to do a couple minor things that we've not done yet. So one of them is signage and maybe put a fence up. But this is a massive site, as many of you all know, and where wells, where tanks 8, 9, and 10 are right now undeveloped, but the tanks have been removed. That was, I believe, was done during Josie Behnke's time, where those tanks were taken down. And I've always deferred to either Ron or to John, or Larry, because Larry was a young man when he was helping clean up the site, for some guidance on this, because there is a lot of history with this property and fits and starts. So the goal is to bring site closure to this, to remediate what's left so the site can be closed. But there'll still be testing, as I recall. Some testing, maybe.
So with regard to, no, the city doesn't have to approve, but they certainly could object if they had an issue with it. And this has, the Gold House site is a distinct thing with ADEC, as opposed to all the rest of the stuff, which is up on top of the hill, the old shacks or shops and the like. Both the city, Bering Strait are involved in that property, and Nova Gold or Alaska Gold as well. And so on the upland side, we have worked cooperatively. Ron's been a great help from the Nova Gold site on navigating some of the issues with our own properties, and so we've attempted to take a holistic approach to all of this, and because ultimately we would like to get closure to our own sites up above, and certainly we want folks to feel that the activities that have occurred are in accordance, or that, how things are left, that those are in accordance with what the community would hope and want in the future. So just that as a little background thing. Then, Ron, welcome, and I'm sorry I'm a couple minutes late here, but good to see you.
Good to see you, John, also. And maybe we can jump in, because I think when we put up a map, it'll be a little bit easier. Gerald's certainly very familiar with this, but a little bit easier to understand kind of where this kind of fits into the area. And as was discussed, you guys all know where the bluff is, where the old power plant is. The Gold House site is below that, adjacent to the creek. And if you go to the next site, the next slide, you can see the area in red there. And hopefully you can see that and we'll talk about this, is the area that Nova Gold still has ownership of, and it's its own distinct contaminated site from DEC's perspective. So this, Phil, was the picture of what was out there going back 1977.
This is an aerial photo from
It's
1977.
so you can see a building on that site, which, and some of the water features and that aspect. But that area is what we're talking about tonight. That's the site that Nova Gold retains ownership of. We're going to go to the next one. A little bit of the history, right? That is the former New Gold House. It was built and operated right around 1975 by Alaska Gold Company. And the intent of it was, many of you may be familiar with this, using mercury to essentially recover gold from the ore. And then there was a retort process essentially to remove the mercury and recover it also. As far back as 1987, there was a compliance order that was issued by DEC because of concern over mercury contamination in that area. And then if you go to the bottom of that page, the operation ceased in 1988 out there. Moving to the next one. And there was some initial work, part through the compliance order, that started to identify that there was mercury and arsenic contamination in the soils at that site. We did not acquire the property. We actually acquired all of AGC's assets. You guys are probably familiar with the Rock Creek property in 1999. So we owned properties all throughout Nome, including the former New Gold House. In 2004, we went in, and that predates me, and we removed the building. Larry was involved in cleaning that out. There was still actual mercury in the building that was left. There was, remnants of the process and that aspect of it. So the building is gone, as you're probably aware of. The water tank and stuff are gone, and the building and the mercury were removed at the time, and there was some soil removal done. And maybe move to the next slide. So they investigated the mercury and arsenic right around the building itself, and some of that material was excavated and safely disposed of, and we removed a water tank that was there, and a fence was installed. Anybody's down there can see there's a fence around the property at this point to prevent the public from accessing it. We occasionally get a muskox wandering through, but it has been there since 2007. On to the next one. So really, in 2009, we knew that there was still some residual contamination in the soils themselves. So we really started, and a lot of the original soil investigation work was done in that next couple of years there. But we've really that was the start of a monitoring program we've implemented since then, to characterize the soil, the sediment, the surface water, and the groundwater in vicinity of the former New Gold House site. So it just goes through some of the things. One of the things we also looked at, Nome mercury is, generally associated with, there's some natural mercury, but it's generally associated with the man-made sources. Arsenic, as you're aware, is in the soils naturally here. So as we looked at what is a cleanup level for arsenic, we had to take into account what is the naturally occurring. The actual naturally occurring level of arsenic is higher than what we call DEC's cleanup standard. What if you had just no arsenic at all? What would be the health-based number? So we had to come up with a number that would represent the background concentration for that. And then in 2012, we'd started the year before, but we negotiated an agreement with Bering Straits Native Corporation, where they essentially took on acquired all the properties associated with it. Some of the old dredging stuff had been sold before that, the old placer mining areas, but all the properties in town were sold to Bering Straits, except for, I think to a large extent because of the liability issues and that aspect at the former New Gold House site. And then, John, you guys can comment, the adjacent 6th Avenue property at some point after that was then acquired by the city, and that's where the Richard Foster building was built. So that's kind of how we all fit together in this process. And those areas are on the bluff above the former New Gold House in that area.
About how deep was the excavation and the subsequent wells? What depth on average?
So it varies. We do have a couple of wells that are up above the bluff, and those go down to as deep as about 40 feet below ground surface. The wells that are closer to the New Gold House itself are down about as deep as between 15 and 25 feet below ground surface. The test pits, we dug as deep as 8 feet.
So, as I said, we've been, except for 2020, which was obviously the year that changed a lot of people's lives, we've been doing continuous groundwater, surface water, and sediment monitoring out there. I think there was one year we did 2 events, but generally we've done annual monitoring out there to develop a record of not only the site itself, but the surrounding around it. Basically, we've looked at the stream and the groundwater wells are set up so we can see where contamination could migrate to, and that aspect of it. And then as part of that, we've been thinking about and this is part of DEC's process also, what is the best remedial action out there? How do we prevent future risk? What's the best way to do it in a reasonable manner? We did some, that area of Dry Creek, and you guys, if you're familiar with it, we do see some fish there. I wouldn't say it's a major salmon bearing stream, but you do see some coho salmon. You do see some spawning further up the creek, and there are certainly resident fish out there. We see Dolly Varden near that old bridge trestle area at the site. We did do some fish tissue sampling in 2016 to see if there were levels in fish tissue that would be of concern, both to the fish, but also, it's not clearly a site you'd see a lot of subsistence level aspect, but just looked at it from that perspective also. And we've also done some monitoring, looking at the groundwater levels. Again, how does the groundwater levels vary with time, because that affects, potential migration and that aspect of it and where groundwater goes out there. So we've had a pretty, a lot of site characterization work in the 2010, 11, 12, particularly in soils, but then more of this broader, is something moving out there, particularly as it relates to the creek over the past decade. The next one. So we've had a lot of discussions on potential remedial actions over the past decade. And Art and Phil's going to talk a little bit more about this when we get into it, but ultimately we selected to propose a cap over it. And we'll talk about why the cap is we believe is the right approach. But we would use rock and other material for here to put essentially a cover over the remaining soil contamination that exists out there. A lot of discussions over the last decade with DEC, but in 2021, they essentially approved the capping approach. And then later in 2021, we did work to effectively develop the engineering design for the cap. Prepared a final design earlier this year, and that was approved by DEC. As I said, that's the plans that you see here, and we'll talk about those a little bit more as Phil gets into the discussion. We're still, as I said, working through some final details on the monitoring plan, but that's where we're at. And as Phil said, we'd like to implement this cap still this year while we still have a field season. And again, he's going to go into a little bit more on the extent of the contamination and the design itself, but maybe if anybody has any questions at this point, happy to answer them.
In 2016 fish tissue analysis, was there any findings?
There were, and we have a bullet about it in a couple of slides.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else? All good? Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Ron.
Okay, if we could go to the next slide. Oh, Ron, that's kind of.
And you know, this is, I apologize, this is the process that DEC uses. And I think, you know, we've had certain steps to this that we've gone back and forth on it. I think, you know, the biggest thing about there is you follow this process, and this is partially why it's taken this long period of time of getting a good site characterization. As I said, we had to look at this issue of arsenic in soils, and that leads you to, if you scroll down to the next little bit, you know, how we got to the point where we proposed the cleanup plan to DEC for their approval, and now to the point at which now to actually implement that.
Next slide. All right, so we'll talk about the site characterization activities in a little bit more detail. We'll go to the next slide. So this aerial photograph shows a little bit more, now I'd like to say clearly, hopefully you all can see the property boundaries of the various entities. So the red line is the property that is owned by Nova Gold. You can see a green outlined area, and this photo was taken in 2021. So it's much more recent, but it shows the presence now of the Richard Foster building. All of the tanks that were there historically to the east have all been removed. And then to the west and south of the Richard Foster building is the area that is owned by Bering Straits. So this kind of shows where the property delineations are. You may also see there's some little dots with labels. Those are the locations of the monitoring wells that have been put in at the site since 2012. And we just put a little crosshatch to show where the new Gold House used to be, but of course that building's now gone. Next slide, please.
What's the ownership up in the upper right-hand corner between the city ownership, the green line and the bypass road? What's that? Yeah.
So the green is the city, it's Commerce Bench. The dotted line is Bering Straits and Alaska Gold Company, and the red is Nova Gold.
I think he's asking about the area of the, and this is based on contaminated sites that DEC had.
What is that, Gerald? I think that's Arctic Gold, the other company.
The city has some portion of that, and
There are multiple lots in there.
no, it's just as a single parcel. But because we have the section that comes from the end of Stedman, and if you just drew a straight line from Stedman out to the Greg Khrushchev, that and something on either side of it is part of the city's.
Okay. But right adjacent to it in that section, you said is another entity?
The other company, Arctic Gold.
Gold?
Next slide, please. So this is our kind of a tale of the tape of what's been done over the past decade. You all can read this as well as we can, but we wanted to make the point that Nova Gold has extensively investigated all of the media that are important out there at the former New Gold House site, from groundwater samples to surface water in Dry Creek to sediment samples in the vicinity and within Dry Creek, and nearly 140 soil samples that have been collected to determine both the nature and the extent of contamination that was present, and to hone in really primarily on the mercury and arsenic contamination. Next slide, please. So with all of that data that's been collected, I'm going to spend a few slides talking about what our determinations were, and with ADEC's input, what we concluded was going to be happening here at the site. Good catch. Just move that out of the way. So next slide, please. So this, I will apologize, is the wordiest slide in the entire presentation, but it does address the fourth bullet, your question about the fish. We did have some detections of mercury in the fish, but it was certainly not anything that was considered to be harmful to them. I would like to actually hone in on the third and fifth bullet in all of these words, because they're what really drive the actions that we're proposing to take here with Nova Gold. That mercury and arsenic contamination above background concentrations are present in the near surface soils at the FNGH site. And the fifth bullet, that the primary mechanism for contaminant movement is from erosion. So those 2 points and concerns are what really kind of formed the rest of our approach for this site. If you want to scroll down just a little bit, you can let folks see some of the other conclusions. But like I said, lots of words. So yeah, we collected a lot of data, and we came up with some very important conclusions about both mercury and arsenic, but I would say the most salient points of this slide are the third and fifth bullets. We move to the next slide.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, of course.
Background concentration, I assume that means what's naturally occurring.
Correct.
And so all those wording things put together, there were levels higher than background concentrations.
Correct.
Throughout the site. There were also contaminants found in the fish, although it indicates in there not considered harmful to the fish. So both the groundwater and the ground has been found with all of these studies to be contaminated, correct?
I want to clarify that a little bit on the groundwater piece. If you notice the slide, it says mercury has been detected in area monitoring wells. The levels are below the DEC Table C groundwater cleanup levels. Now, arsenic is present above background concentrations, but we didn't do a background study in detail for groundwater. We did it for soil, but we believe because of the elevated natural levels of arsenic in soil, it only makes sense that there'd also be elevated natural concentrations of groundwater at the site.
But if the contaminant levels are in the fish, it's coming from surface water, correct?
Well, so the contamination of fish that we were focusing on was not arsenic and mercury, it was primarily methyl mercury, which is what they would ingest primarily through sediment contact in the creek.
Okay.
Great questions.
So the groundwater cleanup levels for DEC, that's anything above it has to be addressed? Is that a fair way
If
to
it was
say that?
above it, it would be something we would have to address, yes.
That's all, thank you.
Okay, next slide, please. So, based on, again, our focus being arsenic and mercury in soils, that formed what we wanted to do for our cleanup techniques evaluation and starting to look at technologies that would address that particular concern. And so these were the technologies or cleanup approaches that we considered for the cleanup techniques evaluation. There's always a baseline one, which is the do nothing option. And then it goes from there to different types of approaches. Very early in the process, we looked at solidifying and stabilizing the soil, injecting a certain chemical substrate, basically in effect encasing it in equivalent of concrete. So that's what the solidification stabilization approach was that we looked at, and we did some field work on that front. Excavation, just getting it all off the site. capping it, covering it with a geosynthetic membrane and then capping it, or a kind of a combination where we did a partial excavation and a partial cap. So those are kind of the realm or universe of options we thought would be potentially feasible out there. Next slide, please. So each of those we looked at for these criteria, and these are regulatory criteria, so we didn't make them up. These are things that we had to look at in each of these various options from the previous slide. And to not read them out loud to you too much, but the points were they be protective? Were they practical to implement? Would they be permanent? Would the regulators agree with them? Was it not overly expensive? And would it be accepted by the state and the community at large? And so based on those criteria, what we are putting forth is, if you can slide it down, a little bit of drama, although there's no drama here, engineered fill cap is what we settled on as the proposed remedy.
That's another question.
Sure.
What's the safest way? Forgetting about cost, forgetting about all these, what is the most safest way or the cleanest way to address this particular issue?
Well, we believe it's the engineered fill cap.
It's not removing it?
Well, removing it could create some other issues. Certainly, if you're talking about excavating right next to a creek, there could be some other environmental and ecological concerns that really kind of negatively affected the overall scoring and outcome of the excavation option.
So removing it would dislodging the material. That's the concern of both.
Dislodging material was a significant concern.
And that was DEC's concern as well?
I think DEC came around to that once we were looking at pointing out the full impacts of what those things could be. I would say early on, some of their preference may have been towards the excavation option, but I believe that we, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but we have moved forward with going forward with the engineered fill cap because it just is the most overall protective approach. So we have not, all the testing, we've not seen substantial impacts on the creek itself. Generally, the quality of the creek is, the main stem of the creek itself is good. We see, a fish population within the creek and that aspect of it. So balancing out, disturbing, doing a major excavation out there, given the hydrology and everything associated with it, the more practical, less intrusive approach to deal with the issue that we believe through the work that we've done is the most specific, the longest term risk, which is erosion of those contaminated soils and potential infiltration to them, is the most practical and also the least intrusive approach to do going forward. So, we have another issue that's out there in the sense that, and this is the other sites that are up on the bluff that the city and Bering Straits have responsibility for. There is petroleum contamination in the ground up there because of the, historic, you probably remember the old tanks that are out there, were out there. It's not uncommon that you see, contamination. There is, what we see is that contamination does not get to the main stem of the creek itself, in part because we believe there's a permafrost ridge along the bluff. So the soils are essentially, now all the sources are gone. There's no remaining petroleum hydrocarbons, but there remains petroleum hydrocarbon in the ground. And it migrate, the migration pathway, we see some petroleum hydrocarbons underneath the former gold house, not in the creek. So the question has always been, what if you went in and started basically removing everything out there in the ground? You very easily could remove that barrier to what's been there. And this has been there, we've been monitoring this for more than a decade. The sources have been gone for an extended period of time. But going in there and doing an intrusive cleanup could very easily disturb that in that aspect and essentially create a pathway to potentially see that move down into the creek. So to us, the cap provided that kind of vehicle to stabilize the site while leaving in place those natural barriers that keep contaminants from getting to the creek itself in that aspect of it. And that's the way we've kind of thought about it as part of this. It's, you start excavating out there and you start doing it, frankly, you could create quite a mess
out there in terms of, physically. The site, you guys have seen it. I mean, it's actually pretty stable out there, and as said, our fisheries work and everything. We have, it appears the creek is in pretty good shape out there. And that's always been kind of our primary pathway is how do we protect the creek over the long term?
I've got a bunch of questions, but I'll let you get.
No. I mean, this is good. Please.
So I guess my first question is how permanent is the permafrost barrier? Because we're all dealing with permafrost and we're all dealing with settlement and everything else. And so, the question, I definitely understand the concern about not wanting to dislodge that if it will create migration from other areas. But is that just a temporary issue? And what will happen if that permafrost does thaw in the future and it migrates anyways into the cap?
Well, a couple of things, and again, all the sources are gone, the existing contamination, particularly the hydrocarbons and that aspect of it. We're not walking away from this site. We will have to continue to do monitoring. We have been monitoring for the past decade, and what appears to be is stable at this point. We'll look at hydrocarbons. We'll continue to look at mercury and arsenic, and if for some reason levels go up or things, we'll have to implement. I mean, it's going to be a while before there's any walk away from this site. There's no end to our continuing to monitor. So we will have the obligation that if this doesn't work over the long term, that we'll essentially have to go back and that's it. What we do see, at least so far in the more than decade we've been monitoring, is the plume has remained stable. There's no evidence that it's moving or that as particularly the hydrocarbons. So at this point, this seems to be the most practical alternative, but we will not be walking away from this in terms of saying we're not. It'll take an extended period of monitoring. We'll have to see how effective it is over the long term in that aspect. And if we start to see movement or something to that effect, we'll have to go back and address that as part of it.
So in your analysis, you did not project the permafrost bridge or barrier eroding?
We do not assume that it's going to that bear. And the assumption again is that it is solely related to permafrost. But we also assume it will take time that at some point, particularly the hydrocarbons, will degrade naturally on their own because the sources are gone in that aspect.
In your diagram, how much of that property you plan on capping?
We have a couple of slides that will show kind of the area of where the cap will be. Those are coming up here. I don't want.
Well, I was
I don't want you
kind
to
of waiting for
the
the
slides, so you want to race these through these, but that's a great question. But in the design drawing package here, you see the plan view of it, so everyone can look at that. But there is a couple of slides about that. But if you can scroll down, so are we okay? Do we have any more questions before I move into this slide?
No, we can keep going. I mean, there'll be plenty of time to.
So, this slide kind of explains why, from our perspective, we've already kind of touched on it, but these are the key points that why this the cap was really rose to the top as being the overall preferred remedy here. It eliminates the potential for direct exposure to contamination, the arsenic and mercury contamination, and it will stop the erosion of contaminants that remain at the FNGH site. The cap has been designed to withstand flooding events, so that the cap won't wash away once it's installed. It will limit the effective infiltration from precipitation events and such. And as you can see, it will address these contaminants that are in a pretty limited concentrated area, both efficiently and cost effectively. So those aspects were what really helped this remedy kind of rise to the top as being the preferred choice. Next slide. Okay, so now to get to some of your points here about what the cleanup plan is actually about and what it looks like. If we go to the next slide here, once we decided that the cap was the remedy, we had to make some design considerations that are extremely important because a cap in and of itself conceptually can go a whole bunch of different directions. And so we had some considerations and some constraints that were put onto this cap to make sure that these criteria would be met. While we were eliminating the primary potential contamination source, there were also some other practical aspects. We wanted to use a local source for materials. We wanted to use local resources to build it. And a great deal of time and effort and money was spent to find where this stuff is. We didn't want to create a scenario where everything was going to get all mucked up and torn up again, and all of that characterization would be lost. So we wanted to minimize how much of the cap implementation would disturb the land and the surface at the new Gold House site as is. And then also very important is once it's in, it needs to be maintained and monitored, and we wanted to make sure that it's something that could be done as easily and feasibly as possible. So those were things that went into the design development. And now we can go to the next slide. So this is what, again, this side's a little bit busy because it's the plan view of the design drawing itself. But this shows you where the outline is. If you want to have some a frame of reference, that kind of gray crosshatched whale or tadpole looking portion up towards the top, that's the pond that's out there. This would include filling that pond as part of the remedy. And then the black outlined area is the limits of the cap that would cover the mercury and arsenic contamination. There's some lighter gray areas. Those gray areas kind of show areas where there's depressions within that footprint. Those areas would be, it's just for the contractor to know those areas need to be filled up to grade before the cap is then installed over it. So it's just simply a matter of making sure that everything is level, and we're not just following the natural topography that's out there, but making it a more robust cap. Now, the next slide, don't go to the next slide yet.
Before you go to that next one. It's kind of grayed out on here, but I mean, we can see where the road is, and then we can see where the creek is, and the creek is way up above this particular site. Is that what I'm seeing?
Correct.
So, where the actual creek goes through there is, I mean, I don't know elevation-wise how that plays into it, but there is a significant separation, I guess, between the creek and this proposed cap.
And so maybe you could just real quick mention how we decided how big this cap would be, the area that we actually with the criteria for making that decision.
Yeah, so a good point. The cap is covering the extent of the mercury and arsenic contamination that exceeds the arsenic background levels for soils out here, and also exceeds DEC's cleanup levels for mercury. So that's where the cap footprint covers. There may be some very low concentrations of mercury or arsenic outside of that, but they would be below those two thresholds and criteria. So that's how the limits of the cap were defined. It's also important from a standpoint of the hydrologic modeling. The closer we get to a running body of water, the more challenging it is to maintain and keep the integrity of the cap. So we wanted to also have that particular balance, and that's why it's also very important that the pond be filled in as part of this remedy.
So those 140 samples approximately that were done to characterize, and their dots all the way through in and around that area, were essentially to delineate where that soil contamination was. So, where the levels posed a risk, that's where we designed that cap based on that data to cover that area.
You may notice on the far right, there's this little tiny rectangle. There we found a small area of elevated mercury contamination there. So that area will also be capped, but it's just a very small area. But the area in between it, we did not find any mercury contamination that rose to that threshold.
I'm trying to put in where the creek is.
Can you just point it out?
Okay, so it's way up top there.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then it flows down around to
Okay, I see.
to the left side down, and then comes under the
If that area,
highway down to the left.
About what's the distance just roughly, I mean, looks like it sort of skirts around, what is that? A couple hundred feet,
Yeah, probably a couple hundred feet.
couple hundred feet, roughly.
And how big is that pad, that cap you're putting on there?
So it is just under 1 acre in total surface area. It's almost exactly an acre.
So you're saying the closer you get to a surface water, the harder it is to protect or maintain the stability of the cap.
It's one of the design concerns and criteria. Yeah.
Similar to the concern about digging and excavation, that within a certain distance of the stream.
Yeah. Now, one of the things.
You're doing a lot of disturbance there, obviously, and you want to stay far away from it.
Right. Yes. One of the things we did was quite a bit of hydrologic modeling, looking at the various flooding scenarios of Dry Creek. A benefit actually for the cap is that the culverts are badly undersized. They go underneath Bering Street. So, as you probably folks who live here know, that it tends to fill up like a bathtub during the spring melt and such, and that's part of it. But that means that slows flows. It's a much slower draining as opposed to a big rushing river that goes by. So that helps with the design integrity.
So
because of the natural nature of how the Dry Creek works.
So the outline of the cap is essentially, as you indicated earlier, where those limits are above DEC. I don't remember the names for it, but DEC's recommended or limits to clean up, and then also the natural occurring.
Yeah, for Mercury, it's
So basically, it's basically saying where DEC is requiring you to clean up is where the outlines of the area is, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, it's the cleanup level for mercury, and then, as you said, for arsenic, because I think the cleanup level for arsenic is 10.
Yeah.
And the naturally occurring levels in Nome, and we've got quite a bit of data that are closer to about 150. So you can't get below, where you are. So that's how we kind of came up with the arsenic. And it's interesting, the arsenic and mercury, and it has to do with the process. If you look at the concentrations, they almost exactly overlap with each other in that area. So the extent of arsenic contamination and started mercurification basically are a pretty good overlap if you look at the soil state.
And the top of the cap is essentially above the flooding levels? Or as
The cap has the potential to be inundated during spring melts, but it is not going to be inundated to any kind of way that would actually degrade the integrity of the cap.
so the cap can be completely submerged and there's no problem with the
Correct.
migration of
Correct.
okay.
So what I wanted to point out is there, you see these two lines that say A, and B. The next slide is going to show the cross section, so you get a sense of looking from left to right or south to north of how the cap, if you were to slice it, would look. So if we want to go to the next slide, so this is a slice of the cap from elevation A, that's on the top, and then below is elevation B. And the elevation B one I think is more interesting because it shows you where we have some of these depressions and dips. And those gray highlighted areas are areas where we're telling the contractor, okay, you need to fill this up and then we'll put the cap in so that we can get a better grade and a little bit more stability. And there's additional details about how you're dealing with and treating the pond off to the right. But those are the basic construction details that's going forward with this cap. And in the lower left in this particular is showing what the vegetation layer is going to be. So after the cap is installed, it will be hydroseeded on top. That is to the benefit of the long-term structural integrity of the cap.
So the cap, I guess I was envisioning the cap being flat, and it's not flat.
It's not entirely flat.
It's essentially following the topography of.
It doesn't exactly follow the topography, but it does slope gently from the bluff down towards the creek because we want to encourage that natural runoff. We don't want to create more depressions. We don't want to create a situation where we get another pond that gets formed there. We want to be able to have a nice gentle runoff from the cap.
And I see it says a minimum, is that what's guiding it? It says a minimum of 24 inches of fill. Is that kind of what's guiding how thick that cap is? You need at least 2 feet?
We need at least 2 feet.
Is that the criteria pretty much that's driving the design of the cap?
In part, it's engineering, but it's also the Laura mentioned the state solid waste program, and that's their criteria is 2 feet of cover material.
So DEC says you need 2 feet.
Yeah, and then again, it also is appropriate for our design as we looked at it from a perspective of long-term stability.
And what type of material is being brought in on the cap?
So I don't have that in this presentation, but it is in the design drawings. We have the specifications. All of these are going to be brought in from the quarry that is being operated by Bering Straits. What's the name of that location?
Cape Nome.
Cape Nome. So it's all coming in from Cape Nome. And it's going to be crushed or broken down to the specifications. So everything from 3-foot boulders down to relatively fine-grained fill material.
You see the next one's features of the cap, so I'll stop.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Well, any other questions on this right now? I think I'd also, if we were to scroll up just a little bit, I want to highlight one other aspect of this on the side view for Plan A. We will have it armored along the side that faces the creek, so there will be riprap all along that side of the cap, the northern facing side. So that's all I wanted to say about that point. And if we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so yes, here's the features of the cap, kind of in a nutshell. I think some of these have already been addressed. Going down about 5 bullets, we'll be putting in a new fence. 2 damaged monitoring wells will be replaced. I think Ron had already mentioned that. We're going to be putting some additional boulder barriers to not only protect against scour from the bluff, but also just to make it a little tougher for trespassers to get out there from the bluff side versus the fencing side. And we already talked about that we will hydroseed the cap once it's been installed.
How deep is the pond that needs to be filled?
Very interesting question. So we have poked and prodded around that pond quite a bit over the years. We found at the deepest point, it was around 7.5, 8 feet deep. There is kind of a bench or a shelf that kind of goes around the perimeter of it that's only about 3 feet deep. So yes, there is a fairly deep portion of it in the dead center, but it's very limited actually. So it's not as big a volume as it may seem.
And it is a man-made pond. We've never seen fish in the pond. So
It was our fishing hole, our swimming hole,
Really?
one of them, yep.
Okay.
It was a
No, it wasn't made for that
Now
reason.
you know why,
but
now you
there
know why
were
everybody is a
several-
certain way in Nome and at
Yeah.
a certain age.
Yeah. There were a couple of them back there, but one out of the back of the generator, the cooling water for the generators. And so that was great, 60, 70 degree water, maybe 80 degree.
If you want to know the 50-year history of this area, John, how far do you go back and remember everything?
10 years.
John is a wealth of knowledge.
I
of
never
the
swam
history
there.
out
I only jumped my bike on Red Bridge.
Okay, all right.
And we benefit from that.
I was just wondering why it was made, if it was just a remnants of the mining left over or something.
No, it was just kind of a naturally occurring thing. And I mean, somebody had dug some dirt out of it at one point in time to, fill some other areas. So, unfortunately, that was kind of a little bit how this all, happened, was that some materials were moved around on that site. And, they weren't originally as close to the creek as they ended up. But I guess just a couple of things, on these cleanup technique evaluations and the process for determining, what is the technique to be advanced or done. All of Nome is on pretty much the same dirt, and you can dig in your backyard likely, and you're going to find background. If it's not thawed, probably on your hill, but there are these background concentrations everywhere, and the idea of permafrost up in the areas and not disturbing that. We've had some major discussions on, the monitoring requirements up there on the top of the hill, because, where the tanks actually were, there was some weeping and likely spillage from those. But, there's also a border, I guess, around those things that's keeping it from migrating further. Institutional controls is something that we have on some of our own properties. When the Richard Foster building was built, 100% of what was on that ground was not removed. But you go through this process with DEC to determine, you don't want it to get further into the environment, and you don't want it to be in contact with people. And so, sometimes it's not possible to take it all out, but those are the things that you're trying to prevent from occurring. So, this is same thing out on this West Nome Tank Farm area that we'll be acquiring here by deed very soon. On the site where the existing power plant is, that has institutional controls associated with it. You can't dig, you can't disturb the cap, you can't put a drinking water well in there. And so, sometimes, it's just not possible to get it all out of there. And so, the thing then is to keep it from migrating and to keep people from coming in contact with it.
You also have Stedman Park.
Yep.
Which is
Which is essentially the same thing. That was the gold site from before that's how it got to be the new gold house, even though it went back into the 60s, so it wasn't that new.
And we have a cap there, but we're gonna also have to fix the cap on that, and that was where a lot of arsenic was.
Okay. We're almost done. So I'm going to ask you to go to the next one here. So the next steps, I think this is very important, where we're now really kind of looking at that potential actions where the city may be involved. But again, this has already been mentioned by Ron. Nova Gold is going to be partnering with Bering Straits to provide both the construction materials and resources to construct a cap. Nova Gold is pledged to work with the city of Nome to complete any outstanding permits and resolve any logistics issues. And with the assumption that we will get final approvals, we are anticipating trying to mobilize within the next month to 6 weeks. We believe it'll take about 2.5 weeks from mobilization to demobilization. And then we're hoping to have it completed by mid-October if that schedule holds. So that's basically what the next steps are. However, I want to go to the next slide. There is one more thing what happens here afterwards. So once we have the cap in place, we will start the performance monitoring. Semi-annually is how we will be doing that, and it will include these activities. So we'll be surveying the completed cap for the as-builts and for the remedial action report. We will continue to sample the groundwater, surface water, and sediment. And then as enough data is collected over the course of several years, start to conduct trend analysis of those contaminant concentrations, seeing if the cap is indeed performing as we intended to. Of course, the other aspects of it, the fencing, the cap itself will be inspected and maintained, and that will lead us to, of course, submitting the final cleanup report for ADEX to review and approve. ADEC will also, of course, be reviewing all of our monitoring data, and if they don't like what they're seeing, they could require additional action if the cap does not perform as expected. And of course, the big $64,000 question is, when will the site be closed? At this point, there's just not enough information. We really need to know how the cap is going to perform before we can actually say we want to have a target date. It is years and years down the road, though. I think that's a fair statement to say. And I think with that, we move to the question slide, which is kind of really our next to last slide. So
Yeah, it's solely within ADC's discretion when, we could propose to stop monitoring after a period of time. I don't envision that happening for quite a while. as we go forward. But it's only them who would make a decision, have we done enough out there to demonstrate the long-term risk? Now, leaving it in place, leaves, makes it less certain. So, you envision that any monitoring program would have to go on for an extended period of time to demonstrate that, you got to the point where you didn't need to do it anymore. That's not a decision Nova Gold makes on its own moving forward, and it would be ADC who ultimately would make that decision as part of it. And, we've got aspects in our monitoring program that look at specific places and say how you make that determination. If it's not, if we see levels going up or that aspect of it, that's where, again, we could trigger additional either modification of the cap or if additional remedial action was required, up to and including if it was needed to actually excavate the material and do things moving forward.
So Ron, the folks from ADEC that are on the phone, they're here to observe, or are they here to make any comments? Or should they, I'm sure neither of us misspoke, but sometimes it comes out differently.
Oh, absolutely. And we should certainly give them a chance. And again, I'm sure they would, if there are questions and other things about, their program and the site and that aspect of it, certainly.
I have a question. The cap, is it just the 2 feet of fill, or is there also like a geotextile type of thing in there somewhere? Or I'm just curious.
No, it's a great question. Geotextile was one of the components that was evaluated, one of the possible remedies. The remedy we're putting forward does not have a geotextile membrane in it. We've just found that up here, it doesn't perform very well, and it may make the cap more vulnerable in the short term for needing more maintenance and more repairs. Mm-hmm. So the benefits are outweighed by the potential costs for geotextile.
So I guess I was trying to segue into giving Laura or Janice an opportunity if they did want to say anything, and it looks like Laura's opening her mic, possibly. For Janice? Hi there.
Janice is. Hi. Yeah, we are here to basically listen and observe and see what questions you guys ask and see if there's any questions for us specifically about the regulations and the requirements. But you guys have had great questions, and a lot of the questions you've asked are things that we have discussed with Nova Gold in the past. So it's good to hear.
Questions for the regulators?
Sure. So the question I asked earlier was, are we, I mean, I'm used to dealing with fuel contaminated issues, and the overriding direction has typically been you keep digging until you can't find any more. And that's not what we're doing here. And the two reasons that I've heard is, one, it's too close to the surface, to the stream. And the second one is that it may exacerbate migration of petroleum contamination from neighboring sites. Does DEC concur with that? Those are the two primary reasons to not basically dig down and get it out? Because to me, in my mind, digging out and getting it out is the cleanest and surest method. But it sounds like there's other issues at play, and I guess from a regulator standpoint, what's your perspective on that?
When we first went through this, I think the DEC's favorite approach was the combination of a cap and then some hotspot removal, so digging some of it out. But Nova Gold has made the case that they don't really want to do any excavating out there because it could cause some erosion, additional erosion of the material into the environment, and I think that's a fair concern. I've never been too sure what would happen with the petroleum if they did, some digging out there, but certainly anytime you go to start excavating in an area like that, that's basically right next to and in a wetland, it can create a messy site. So yeah, we are at this point approving like we've approved the cap and agreed to go in that approach as long as there's a good monitoring plan to follow up with so we can actually see what's happening once the cap is installed.
Once the cap's installed, can you use that property for alternative uses? It's like, I know the NJU is looking at that for potentially a tank farm site, another contaminant site. Is this something that could be theoretically used for something else down the road?
No one has asked that yet. And I just here, I'm thinking about other caps that I'm aware of, and I can't come up with one that I know of that is being used for something else like that. It's something that would have to be looked at and evaluated and then checked against our regulations. And so it doesn't sound like something that typically happens.
We are, just for everybody's record, we are using, Stedman Park has a basketball court on it, but it's not being used right now because there are problems with the cap. And the Air Force property that the city is looking to acquire also has test wells around it. And one of the discussions has been is how much weight can the cap handle? So that's been a discussion because we're looking at it as a possible laydown area. And we're looking at areas where the cap is not. And John, I'm really stepping on your territory as NJUS, is the possibility of tanks being sited not on the cap area because the piece of property is much larger than the cap. I think what Ron was saying here right now, they're going for the best approach is to fence it all the way around.
Fence it, revegetate it like that area is right now. I think we would be leery of any use that could cause damage to that cap, particularly anything that involved, as you said, damage to the subsurface. So I don't think it's totally out of the realm of possibility, but I think we'd be very leery about something that, could disturb or damage the cap as it was out there.
And as the property owner, you have no plans to do that?
We have no plans other than we'd like it just to be. So the area looks good at this point, and we're hoping that even with the cap, we will recreate the natural vegetation that's out there right now in that aspect of it.
On your monitoring plans, how long is that for right now?
For now, it's forever until we demonstrate adequately to DEC that we've shown that there's a long enough period of time that, the levels have gotten to the point that there's no end point to it right now. There's no end point to, potentially at some point we might say we'd ask if we could go to annual monitoring, but at this point we'll be doing once during the spring and once during the end of the summer. So at this point there's no end to that process. I mean, there's always a practical consideration with this, and I think, as I said, people do say, we'll just take it all out of the ground in that aspect of it. And it is, particularly with mercury contaminated soils, to be honest with you, an extraordinarily expensive and difficult thing to do because there are very limited places you can actually, just to be honest with you, take mercury. I don't believe there's any place in Alaska that it can be managed. It's not like hydrocarbon soils. We did some hydrocarbon work here. And Nome Gold has done a lot of work even before these two properties were transferred to the city in Bering Straits. I mean, the warehouses were emptied of all kinds of chemicals. And they way back, way before we started, all the tanks were empty. There was some superficial. The soil contamination, that stuff we were able to, with DEC's consent, the small amounts that we could put into the landfill. Mercury is a very complicated aspect of it. So if you combine that with the fact that we don't see effects on the creek itself as it is right now, with the potential risk of digging down and really disturbing that area tremendously and potentially creating a mess out there, including for the hydrocarbons, this is how we got to the point where we've worked with DEC over the past decade to feel like this was the right approach to balance those requirements.
I think it's fair to say that if material was excavated out, what was reasonable, the cost would be significantly higher than the plan that's being proposed now, correct?
Yes, I mean, again, I'm just being honest.
Yeah, no,
To put mercury on a barge and send it to a very specialized disposal
it'd
facility.
be a lot more expensive.
Is a very good option to do that.
That's all I've got, thanks.
Cheryl?
Thank you.
I guess good questions, and we're happy to, as more questions arise, happy to respond. So we've had a good relationship, feeling like with the city as well as Bering Straits, and, happy to respond to any additional questions that you have. And I'm sure DEC is more than available to, if you have any questions of them also. So whatever we can do to provide more. We would like to do this project this year. We're working to put in place that aspect so that's our intent. And that's what we're moving forward with. But obviously, again, we welcome, whatever you feel like, however the city wants to move forward in that aspect.
But it doesn't sound like the city needs to approve this, though, does that?
The city does not need to approve it, but like I said, if the city wanted to object for some reason, DC has already gone through the regulatory process and considered the data, looked at what is the what protects the environment and balances the cost, which is always, if you're spilling 55 gallons of fuel or 150 gallons of fuel or even 800 gallons of fuel, whatever that might be, out there at the Air Force thing, there are hundreds of thousands of gallons probably that have been spilt over the time. And, there's some things you can take and get it all out. Others, you can chase it for a long, long time and never get the last drop, I guess, to say. So,
So does this meeting tonight pretty much check the box on the public input process of this?
well, on this last part, but there's been public input on previously in this, because they're not.
I mean, I'm just wondering if, like, the public, I know this is a public meeting, but if there was going to be something that was advertised essentially and,
It was advertised when this document, the meeting was put out on the agenda. I mean, I'm actually surprised we don't even have any press in here, because they would have all gotten the agenda, because this was put on the agenda prominently.
would it, and again, it's a question, would it unreasonably delay the process to have a public session on this, so that at least the public's aware above and beyond this meeting?
Well, that's.
I know you're, I know you're taking a deep breath there.
Yeah, well, I mean, they have a timeline, and,
I mean, this is a huge issue.
well, and we were notified, the city was notified, because I brought it up to the council in executive session that we were working, because this was a legal matter. And, that's why we got a letter, Ron got a letter, and Bering Strait Native Corporation received a letter that nothing had really happened on behalf of us by that complaint, I guess. I don't say nothing, but they were looking for an update, would be a better choice of words. And then we went down and we've had phone conversations. We went down and met with them to come up with this pretty much agreed upon plan. I mean, it was pretty much, and I know where you're coming from as like a gas station, because normally they go in, if it's a fuel tank leak, they make you, dig everything.
Actually not.
Well,
My concern is that the
Where
public.
I'm from, that's what they do.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what obviously, if DEC has reviewed the plan, if DEC's approved the plan, and they're in agreement with Nova Gold on the best way to address this, that's what ADEC does. What I'm quite wondering is, is the public aware enough of this process? This is Dry Creek. Dry Creek runs into the Port of Nome. People fish in Port of Nome. They go, they catch fish in there. And I'm not saying that this is a bad thing. That's what I'm saying. But I think the public should be aware. And I appreciate we may have reached the requirement to have one public meeting on this stuff. But I guess I would rather have, the community be aware of it in a well-publicized format. This is the plan. And just to hear any objections, if truly we are trying to get the public's input on this issue. I don't have any problems with the plan, Glenn, but I think the public process should be used as much as possible, especially when you're talking with a contaminated site like this. That's all.
Okay, well, that would be a question back to DEC because it's their public process.
Fair enough.
So.
And DEC's right here.
We typically don't seek public comment on every cleanup out there, but if there's a reason to, then we can certainly support the responsible party in having public meetings. We can attend public meetings. We can answer questions. We could put out some fact sheets. There might be some ways that we could do that. That is something that we could sit down with Nova Gold and discuss after this meeting if you think it's an important aspect of this. It's one of the reasons that we wanted to make sure that there was some outreach to the city because once the cap is started, people might have questions.
Exactly. And I think it's best to allow the public to ask those questions now. I had a number of questions, but they were pretty much all addressed. And I think that I'm just want to make sure that the public has that same opportunity. Not that we didn't know that we didn't publicly disclose this meeting, but that we simply, maybe one wouldn't help. That's all. It's not going to hurt.
We have no, we suggest, we've talked about this is the format we initially discussed. We have no problem with doing that because people are going to see this. They're going to ask questions. I mean,
Exactly.
people may not be familiar with the site out there and that aspect because it does look, other than the fence, it looks pretty pristine out there. You never know unless you went swimming out there and whatever. It's hard to realize for people to realize in that aspect of it. So, the city's desire is to do something like that. It's not something we object to as part of it. We want to have a fulsome discussion because people are going to see it. They're going to know what's going on. They're going to ask questions. So I'm happy to, however you want to discuss going forward. And again, I think DC wants to do everything in an open manner also. And that's part of the problem. And we've always talked about that.
This might be easier to give the public another opportunity to ask the questions now before instead of afterwards or after it starts. That's the concern I have.
Yeah. And if we can do it soon, that would be good. I guess that's the comment in terms of there's an opportunity to do that.
No, and I guess I'm coming back to, again, is this something with DEC and Gold, or is this something with the city? I guess they presented the plan to the city, and I didn't hear anything around the table tonight from anybody objecting to it in this body. Hearing the request that there be more public input, is that something that they should be soliciting versus something we should be soliciting?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, just like this, we could just have a public information session. That's all.
Well, sometimes it gets a little frustrating as we try to notice the public and the public doesn't come out occasionally.
Understood.
And what I would recommend is that whether the council can attend or not, because they're talking about a schedule, is to allow them to try to have a meeting next week if that works with Ron or whatever.
You can guarantee sunshine. That would be no, that's probably not good. Whatever you guys. I mean, why don't you
just be involved?
Well, I mean, let them.
You have a public. I mean, what's the harm in Nova Gold having a public session on this on their own?
Well, it would be sort of like what we did when we worked with Graphite One, is to use, the old St. Joe's for the meeting, and just do that that they can schedule it so it's always not tied up or tied to your meeting schedule. That was, I was trying to avoid.
No, I agree. That's,
I mean, if you
just
can,
wanting to make sure the public has the opportunity.
I mean, we would certainly appreciate your help publicizing this, and not because you're endorsing it or anything, but if there's a way to, just given the time frame and everything, helping to get this set up, we would be, it would be to our advantage if there's a way to work together to get this organized and pulled together with whatever we need to do from a cost perspective or whatever else. We're not going to argue with that, but certainly in the short term, it would be better if we can, if you guys decide this is appropriate, and we feel like it will, we're happy to figure out a way to make it work.
So I guess realizing that you're on schedule, and it's not like you're doing it tomorrow, but the plan is to start next month on it, or relatively soon. Whether you can be back in Nome for a meeting, or whether it's just something that we set up again as a virtual meeting.
I mean, I like to be in a place personally, because I like to look at, if we're going to do something in someone's town or community. I mean, I don't know who else can participate, but we'll find a way to make it work in terms of doing it. But again, if you guys want to go down this path, we can get a little bit, work with us a little bit on the best mechanism, because you know the community better than we do on where and how, and then we can help with the arrangements and other stuff physically. But if you can help us figure out exactly what the best format and stuff would be, that would be helpful for us.
I guess timing and availability, and maybe coordinate that with Glenn.
Yeah, we are supposed to be having a break. I'm not trying to rush these guys out. We don't even have a quorum. We don't even have a quorum tonight.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good enough.
Well, I mean, I just want to it's, at this time of year, it's hard to get people together. And I guess that's also my point. But that's why I'm trying to get the elected body together versus working with, Ron and Phil to, okay, we'll have a meeting. We may even use this one since we have more technology in this room. The more I think about it, for Zoom capabilities and everything else.
And this entire session is being broadcast on YouTube, and it is accessible via both our website and our YouTube channel.
So I could, and I understand what you're saying. And you've got a different point of view on it than I do. So I'm trying to adjust for that. The reason I say that, I've known about this project for 10 years, approximately. I mean, we, in my position with Bering Straits, we had talks with Ron and Nova Gold going back. That you're looking like that's not right, but
no. We've been. I think we've. But every year that we've been up here, we've sat down and we've all kind of. There's been a lot of open dialogue about the site.
So I've personally known about it for a long time.
What about it since Friday night when the
exactly. So I fully understand getting it dropped on you, or feel like it's being dropped on you at the last minute, which it kind of is.
I don't feel that way, but there might be others in the community that do feel that way. That's
all. But I mean, community, and I don't know how to say this without making it sound bad, but the community elected us to do the heavy lifting in a lot of areas. We don't have, extensive community input on every permit that comes across us.
We're not even approving it. This isn't our
right. We're not approving it. So I guess Yeah, but if that means it doesn't happen this year,
Nobody's saying
so, well, I mean, you get a public forum, and you're,
We can do this next
you,
week.
you get, yeah, and then what happens when you get, you know, somebody, 10, 15, 20 people in there, and all of a sudden it turns into a shouting match, and I mean that there's the potential for that. So I guess what I would recommend is that if we do a public meeting, that it's not this presentation, or maybe it is, but I mean it's more it's more of a, this is what we're going to do thing, not these are all the options that we're looking at, and we're not going to do this one because it costs too much, and we're not going to do this one because it disturbs things too much, and this is what we're going to do. This is what you can expect to see. This when you look out at Dry Creek and you see stampede trucks dropping big rocks on the ground, this is why, because we're going to put this barrier in place, and we're going to explain what's
Explain
going to
what to do.
happen, what they're going to see.
They're not coming here for permission to do it. It's already been approved by DEC.
Right.
Everybody, the city doesn't have to approve it. DEC approve. All this is providing another public forum
Yeah.
for the community of Nome to say, hey, when we see this big stampede trucks dropping the big rocks and wherever, this is what we're doing it. This is why we're doing it. There's nothing wrong with that, Gerald.
And if you think about historically, you guys go out there a lot, there's not a lot going on at that site generally. Nobody's walking through there.
Right.
But if you can remember when Tanner's went in there and mined, it is a very visual site. Nobody's aware of because of the corner where it is and everything. And when these guys came in there, it's all best laid plans. The gold company at the time let this other small mining company want to do a little bit of mining plan up across the road there. I think where Outsiders is now, maybe. And with all best intentions, is be a small operation, everything else. Boy, they got in there and started doing one thing, and all of a sudden, without very much any public input or whatever, that changed pretty quickly. And it happens to be that they were on their line. They're over their line where they're supposed to be anyway, so it helped to kick them off,
Right.
because they're idiots. But I mean, not only were they idiots to start with, but they're idiots because they didn't mine in the right place and they're supposed to be. But what the point being is that it is a very visual site that people will recognize when there's, and they may or may not care. It's hard to say.
So, I guess, what about, I mean, you've got your presentation here. Maybe somebody needs to have it spoon-fed, but, I mean, you're using, I mean, I'd say it's relatively concise from the beginning. And is it something that we simply need to have it noticed that, here's the remedial action plan, it's available X, Y, and Z, and having a, if you have any questions, who do you contact? I don't know, I just,
Nobody needs anything spoon-fed, John. That's not what I'm asking.
no, and that's not, I'm just saying, Scott.
I'm just saying, what's the harm in having another public meeting to let the public know what we're doing? I don't understand this pushback, John. I don't. This is the first time I heard about this was Friday night when I got the council pack, and I'm betting most of the people in this community aren't even aware of it. What's the harm in having another public meeting, whether the city's involved or it's simply Nova Gold, to say, this is what we're doing?
Okay, maybe spoon-fed was not the right words on it, but I mean, can this be presented to someone and then have the opportunity to ask questions? Or do we need to have them propose it again?
Nobody's asking for approval on it. They're just letting the community know this is what we're doing. That's all. I had the opportunity to ask questions. I was satisfied with it. I asked a lot of questions. There might be other people in the community that have similar concerns. I don't know. All this is doing is one more format, one more avenue, one more platform for people to ask questions. What's the harm in that? I'm done.
No, I don't, I mean, there's no harm, but I guess I'm just looking at, I mean, are there alternatives to this? I mean, here's a nice presentation that was put together. Do we need somebody to present it again? And you're saying yes.
I'm saying, how many times have we sat here and heard people talk about, oh, I didn't know about this? How come this is a surprise? I'm not saying the city didn't advertise this. This was in a public meeting. That's not what I'm saying. But what's the harm if we're going to start this work in October? What's the harm in having an additional public meeting where we invite it, we advertise it, we say, this is the plan. This is what they're doing. It's not asking for permission. DEC really sounds like the only one that needs to approve it. What's the harm from a public information standpoint? I don't get it.
John, not to get in the middle of this discussion.
Please be the referee.
I would ask, Ron, if we can, you didn't seem to have, or wasn't nodding aggressively no or aggressively yes, if he's capable of getting up here in a very short period of time, or within a couple weeks, or any other additional input, and the council would be invited to attend. I wouldn't call it definitely an open session, council meeting, because we wouldn't have you take any vote, if that's all right with the city clerk. But it would be,
I don't think it's a council meeting. I think Nome Gold is having a information meeting to present it, and that, whether we choose to go or not. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, no, usually when 4 of you are gathered, it could become a meeting, a vote could be taken, you would be, and I'm just trying to avoid that. Like we go through every time someone comes up to visit us, we go through all these, hoops. So if Ron, I would say from the city's perspective, we would offer up at this room, because we have the media, that we can get Zoom in, anybody wanted to participate, and the presentation could be put on if that alleviates any additional concerns, and maybe proactively deals with concerns that people start hearing after the fact.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just, I guess I'm kind of like Gerald, is that I've heard for this for more than 10 years. And I think that, a lot of the public has, maybe not everyone, but, I'm not objecting to another opportunity. I'm just wondering how, what that activity really needs to be. And it sounds like Ron's willing to come up here and hold a little session that the city will help facilitate.
It might. Informing another 10 or 15 citizens in another public meeting is all good. If we actually had the meeting after the work started, saying this is what we're doing, this is what you're seeing, you might have 50 or 60 people show up to find out because they're interested in, oh wow, what's going on? We're not asking for permission, right? At the meeting, it's informative, 100% just informative. This is what's going to happen. So maybe, and I'm just saying, maybe it makes more sense to, and you'd have more participation, more people interested after they actually see the trucks rolling, to say, oh, gee, what's going on? And then you have the meeting, and maybe 50 or 100 people show up to find out. Maybe that's the process to use.
Yeah, I'm a little leery about starting the work if people have significant concerns in that aspect. And we'll work with, if you guys want to keep talking about what the best format is. I know, and Janice and Laura, I'm going to speak for you guys. DCSC has a responsibility to here. They work for the citizens of Nome too. So I think DEC has a specific interest also in making sure the public is fully informed, because they've made a decision here that involves, like any decision, people in communities and other stuff. So tell me what, I mean, I know this is, you know, you guys are a formal body and everything, so I'm certainly not gonna tell you, but we'll make ourselves available to do what you need to do. We could use some help in terms of putting this together, the time frame. Sorry, it's kind of always seems like we rush to some extent to do stuff. We really want to do this in an open way. That's true, and I think we've always felt that way, and we've always talked to folks here and other people and reached out to people. So let us know. You know, keep DC in the loop too, because again, they have that responsibility also. We'll make it work in terms of doing it. If you can just, that's it. You guys, tell us what you know the community, and more importantly, you guys know the community here much better than I've spent a lot of time here. But I wouldn't pretend to really know the people here and other stuff. So we're looking to you to help us to say how do we get. We would like to see, you know, people come and participate in the process. It's not a lot of fun to come to Nome and have nobody be there in that aspect of it and that portion of it. So let us know, and we'll find a way to make it work.
And we have this presentation, Brian, electronically.
Yes, that's available on our website, and as we have walked through this, it's all on YouTube. People's viewing pleasure.
So we can all grab that thing and share it on our social media directly, as well as another way to get it out there.
Stay off social media as much as possible.
Some of us should stay off.
And again, if you know people have other questions or other things specifically, we're happy to answer those as part of this too. I know it's complicated with the 3 sites and everything, and we're happy to be part of that discussion.
I appreciate your indulgence.
So Janice, we'll work with Ron to see how we can come up with another little public opportunity on this, and obviously, I think it's important not just to coordinate with him, but to coordinate with you folks too, so that you need to be involved in this as well.
Yeah, and sometimes sometimes the public really wants to see something from DEC, to know what we're thinking, and we can work with you on what, how to do that best.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time, and sorry you got in the middle of our spats today, so. Have a good night. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Constructive dialogue.
Right.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you, Ron, and everybody here, and
See you again soon sometime.
yeah, right. Okay, it is now 20 minutes after the scheduled meeting time, and we do not have a quorum. Therefore, the meeting will be rescheduled.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
we have a gentleman that flew up today to specifically talk to you, Bob Walker.
Okay.
It was in your packet on a contract that he has, and he has worked I don't know what the solution is, so I'm waiting for the clerk, Brian, to yell at me. I don't know if it violates, since he could just come up here and talk with the people in the room, but the man flew up here, and
Can we continue a work session?
it's not on the work
It's
session.
not on the work session agenda, but it was publicly noticed in the meeting. And then I've got a mea culpa in that I didn't know that we were expected to have a resolution on the agenda tonight, so I did not draft a resolution.
That's my
for
fault.
That's my fault for the approval of, I thought it was in the discussion phase rather than the approval phase.
And that's my fault. This has been going to be on the agenda, then it got off, and got back on. Chip,
So this,
we've just had a lot of people moving in the organization over the last 4 weeks.
so is this relative to E? Or what is it relative to?
Under the manager's report is that should have been under new business after a resolution.
Okay.
But put in my manager's report that we were going to be asking for, I believe I said your approval. You know, this has been an ongoing discussion. Can I just go on right now?
Yes, you can.
Yeah,
It's on here.
it was noticed, we're still live on YouTube. The,
We don't have a quorum, so it
can't take any
doesn't
action.
violate the Open Meetings Act anyway, because we
but
don't
at
have
least
a.
you can hear his proposal,
Yeah.
because I really think you're gonna need a meeting next Monday night to formally approve this, because this is a project that we're gonna end up having to shut the pool down for a short period of time, which means we're gonna have a whole group of people in the pool community not happy with us, but it's addressing this long-term solution. You have the proposal in your packet. I brought some extras in case you didn't have your packets with you. So if not, I really would like Mr. Walker to come up to the front, and or Chip, whoever wants to lead this discussion. Chip, you might as well do the introduction.
Yeah, so I think you guys have met Bob. Come on up. So Bob Walker has done some previous work for us, and we're hoping that he will get us over the finish line by replacing our last section of piping from the sand filters back into the pool. In the process, remove our salt disinfection system and replace it with a more traditional chlorine-fed one. Mainly to save the infrastructure of our pool, which was not designed for a salt disinfection system. So I'll let the expert fill in the rest of the parts.
And before he starts, this proposal is very inclusive, and we looked at if staff could assist in helping with this. I don't know where it happened. I guess he
Cole just stepped out. I think
Cole felt he didn't have enough staff to handle this on what could have been a very tight time frame, and that's why, you know, we're not taking on some of the challenge in regards to this.
Okay, so for those who don't, or that have the packet on the thing, it starts at page 89. Go ahead, Chip. Were you done with what you were going to say?
Yeah, introduce
You
Bob.
passed the baton?
Yeah, I can certainly ask any lead-up questions or answer any questions if you guys have them, but we kind of talked about the initial part of this project before.
Okay, well, welcome back, Bob.
Thank you, City Councilman. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I just went over and looked at your pool again. I don't even know where to begin. Your structure is significantly failing, and I mean it's failing right before your very eyes. The leak that you have in the system is actually in the supply side of the gutters. The perimeter gutter on a swimming pool serves the major purpose of cleaning your swimming pool, not the main drains at the bottom of the pool. So I'm going to give you a little brief Pool 101. Gutters, perimeter gutters are designed to do the lion's share of the cleaning of your swimming pool, because most of the dirt that's discharged by your swimmers is in the first 2 feet of water. So what you have right now is you have no water going over the gutter perimeter, which means you have very little sanitation going on inside the pool. Okay? That's not a good thing. You have a significant leak on the supply side of the gutter system. So the gutter system serves two purposes. It is not only to take water off the surface by breaking the surface tension of the pool, but it also applies clean, sanitized water back to the pool. Okay, so it's got two pipes or two compartments inside this gutter. I don't know what north and south is by standing inside the pool room. I'm going to assume that south is at the far end of the pool where the starting blocks are. But the entire right side of the pool, you have a major leak the entire length of that side right there. In the right-hand corner where there is a graduated step that goes down into the pool is significant. And then there's another leak that's up towards beyond the lifeguard's chair. And I'm not sure where the leak actually is, and it may not be able to be determined until it is opened up to find it. I thought I might be able to find it with a camera inspection, but looking at the amount of leakage that there's there now, it's just not going to be possible. And then if we found the leak, I don't even know if we could get it welded shut. This is the tragedy of salt water. I mean, it eats everything, including stainless steel. So there wouldn't be I couldn't find a welder that would even attempt it because it's just not possible to get a good weld on that highly corroded stainless steel at this point.
If it's possible to do it in Nome, I know the welder.
Well, you still have to find it, sir, and I don't know where we're going to find it. That's just it. I don't know where to find it. It's obviously a fracture in the stainless steel gutter because when I did the pool inspection almost 2 years ago, we had the gutter filled with water and we found no leakage out of it. Okay, we couldn't hear it. We used acoustic sound detection equipment. We couldn't hear a leak out of it. But once we pressurized it up, then we started seeing the water coming up out of the deck because there's a crack somewhere that under pressure opens up. Okay. I have no way of determining who the gutter manufacturer is. So consequently, you're looking at a re-guttering of the entire pool, a whole guttering process. So at this point, because I know money is always tight, the key thing right now, in my humble opinion, we need to get the salt out of the pool to where any further degradation to the rebar and the concrete in and around that pool is at least somewhat mitigated. However, you're not going to be able to, if you want the pool to operate properly, you're going to end up burning through water. Fortunately, the water we're going to put back into the pool, we're going to use ozone and sodium hypochlorite as the sanitizer for this. And the mechanism that's going to do the lion's share of the work is going to be ozone. And so with ozone, we don't have the corrosion factor that we have with salt water. And the amount of sodium hypochlorite we're going to use is going to be significantly reduced because we're going to be using ozone as the primary sanitizer for you. That is a big benefit. However, you're still going to put some water through this structure. I would recommend, it's my recommendation to you that we go through with this project here and get the salt out of the pool. Then in 2 years, if we can make it that long, think about putting a reguttering system into the pool itself. And then we don't have to excavate as much deck to do an exploratory surgery to find a crack. We literally would go in and go back a foot into the tile, and we would literally take the gutter out all the way around the perimeter and then reattach it to the main supply line that it's already going through the wall right now. You have a line coming in from the gutter itself, and then you have a supply line going back to the gutter. And that would be my recommendation. There are some very good systems out there that incorporate surge capacity within the gutter. And I've already inspected the interior of your pool. Your pool is actually in very good shape considering its age. I mean, I've looked at it photographically, and I've had a diver look over every square inch of it. And the tile is in pretty good shape. There's not a lot of grout degradation. So the structure is in good shape, but as we continue to feed that structure salt water, we end up with the same thing that happened to that condo unit in South Florida. I mean, once that rebar is rotted out of there, then the structure just disintegrates. And we want to stop that as quickly as we possibly can. And it's already been going on. We've been 2 years waiting for this project, going on for a while, gentlemen. I mean, I wouldn't even begin to tell you how much degradation there is in the rebar and the concrete as it is right now. But we need to get it out of there. You've got two big items in front of you. Get the salt out and get the gutters repaired so that the pool operates properly. Right now, my recommendation is that we take care of getting rid of the salt out of the system and get rid of it.
So that's the $500,000 here?
Yes, sir, that's what this contract in front of you represents. And I only gave 21 days on this because everything is just, as you know, Marston's already jacked up fuel prices on shipping again. And right now, the pool industry is struggling to find enough HDPE and other plastics because Texas froze up solid. And so the pool industry is almost entirely based on plastic. And so finding the resources, and my subcontractors, well, they prices are changing so fast that I even had to go and ask them to give us a stay of execution till today, to the 8th, because actually I was due to get back to them in 21 days after the 5th of July that this proposal was put out for you. And so we're now at the 8th of August, and so another further delay, I won't be able to guarantee the contract or the proposal.
Well, the council, just so you know, Bob, cannot vote on this tonight. There is not, this is the issue of a quorum. I don't need to jump in, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
But I want to make sure because, we have a problem that we don't have enough council members here, and I'm not sure what all the reasons are, but your proposal, as I have told them, it was in the council packet, just so you know, it was in my notes, and what Chip and I are saying is by putting $500,000 in now, this should extend the life, as your letter said, 10 to 15 years.
It would indeed extend the life if we were not seeing the amount of degradation that is in the actual pool surface itself. Yes, what it's going to do to the supply side of your pool will easily give you that amount of time. Okay, but as far as the structure is concerned, with the amount of salt production that's in and around the structure of the pool, I have no way to give you any kind of a guarantee on that at all. I can tell you right now, what you're putting into the pool in the mechanical room will easily go 15, 20 years without any problem whatsoever. Because we do intend to rebuild the pumps. The filters I already rebuilt myself. They're in great shape. As a matter of fact, I just came out of your pool mechanical room. The only place that isn't leaking right now is your filters. You have a pool pump that has lost its mechanical seal, and there are salt stalactites halfway up this chair on it. And so it's rotted out one of the steel frames that we put in there when we took out the concrete pillars. Now, I haven't been to the pool, guys, in almost 2 years. So it's been a while since I've been down there and looked around. But you have a steady stream coming out of the gutters of salt water. So what it's doing to that structure is, I have no way to guarantee your structure. I can tell you right now that this right here will take care of what's going on in the pump room, but it will not take care of what's going on in the structure. So, I'm sorry if I've misled you. That was not my intention.
Well, go ahead, Scott.
I was just going to ask, so what you're saying is, and I'm not a pool guy at all, so I'm learning, but we could spend $500,000 and our pool could structurally fail in a couple of years. Is that, the mechanical room and everything, and all the things are good, but
it could. However, by getting rid of the salt water, you at least do one thing. You stop that corrosion factor now, okay? And the more you stop that now, means that you're not replacing the entire pool structure at some point later, okay? There's obviously degradation going on in that concrete. There's no doubt about it. It's there. It has to be because it's got salt water impregnated in it. And we're talking salt water that's almost equal to what you have outside across the street here. Okay? It's 3,000, 4,000 parts per million of salt in that water. So forgive me if I misled you. What you're doing to the pump room will indeed give you your 15, 20 years because it's basically going to turn it into a new pump room, okay, with new equipment. Because your filters, when I examined them, when I did the filter rebuild, your filters are in great shape. The housings are in fabulous shape. We've got good media in them.
they'll last easily, properly maintained for quite some time. The pumps need to be completely rebuilt, and your sanitation system needs to get off of salt and get onto something that's not salt-based. The beauty of the sodium hypochlorite system is that you'll be able to generate as much chlorine as you absolutely need by just using salt that you can buy at Lowe's and Home Depot by the ton. So that's the beauty of the Myox system, is you'll be able to generate all the hypochlorite you want, and it'll be based on what your pool's calling for.
So the pumps, everything else, do the work, $500,000. The pumps are good, all the other components of it, with the exception of the structure, obviously doing the work in here and getting the salt out of the system will increase the remaining lifespan of the structure. We just don't know how long that may be due to the fact that the salt has degraded it.
Yes, sir.
Significantly.
Yes, sir.
Gerald or Mark?
What year was the pool built?
'81, we think.
So I,
You remember my stepbrother fighting with the pool for many years before he retired and died? He worked there for 30 years.
Yeah.
The pool was his main nemesis. I
He
know.
was an encyclopedia. I could tell you that even after he hung up his spurs, we would keep going back to him to pick his brain when we couldn't figure some things out. So I wish he was here to help us with this.
so this is a really, not something that, I mean, this would close the pool down for quite a while, starting right today. If we, so we're gonna put $500,000 into this thing. Take some of the problem away, but then we're not sure what's going on with this gutter system and how, what kind of, replacements are going to be required there. Is this the cart before the horse? Should we shut it down, see if we can fix what we've got before we make this conversion? And, is it, I don't know what the pool cost, but I'm sure it's not something that we replace for, $5 or $10 million today. Maybe it is, but I guess, is this just a Band-Aid? And is it the Band-Aid before fixing the bigger wound?
Well, please bear in mind, your salt water that's also degraded your structure has eaten everything in your pool mechanical room. I mean, your pumps I don't even know if I can get the pumps rebuilt. But I managed to talk to Rotec in Wasilla, who's a major pump manufacturer, and they said if they can't rebuild it, they'll replace it with the same price that we're going to charge them for the rebuilding. Because right now, you've got salt water going through all those mechanical fixtures, and you've got salt stalactites all over that room down there. And so continuing to stay with salt is not a good decision. It's not the wisest decision. I understand what you're saying about let's get the leaks sealed up, but staying with salt is not going to change. I don't know if you open up that deck out there, if you're going to be able to find it, sir, to be honest with you. And if you do find it, I don't know if you're going to be able to get it welded up because of all the corrosion that's on that stainless steel. Most of your manufacturers that make stainless steel continuous gutters will not warranty their equipment in your pool if you use salt.
I'm hearing leaks, and I'm seeing, Bob, in your proposal, leak detection, isolate pool leak or leaks, leak excavation and repair. So you've got, you in your proposal, you've got $38,000 right there.
Right.
I'm guessing that's the deck tile repair, or is that?
Yeah, that's replace. But again, this was based on my site visit a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, where I found only the one area by the small staircase going into the pool. Now you have further loss of salt water further up that deck towards the other end of the pool. that wasn't there the last time I inspected it.
So the longer, you're basically saying the longer we wait, the deteriorate, we're kind of caught in between a rock and a hard place.
It's just continuing to migrate, gentlemen.
And I'm just looking, trying to think of a pull out. It's built in sections. You build the bowl first, typically, where you put the frame in, then you gunite it, and then you put the deck on top. So is the problem on the deck, or is it down in the bowl?
And I don't know whether the leak is down by the small staircase and it's migrating up the concrete and coming out of the grouting up on the other end. I don't know where it is for that entire length. You've got 40 feet from the lifeguard stand to the end of the wall, where it's coming all the way up from the perimeter gutter, up between the wall and the gutter. Then you've got 33 feet behind or at the downside of the lifeguard stand towards the wall where the offices and the bathrooms are. So where is the leak? Well, it's hard to say. We could excavate that one side of that deck and see if it's there. I could try to put a camera in there and see if it's there. But the camera I have that I'm going to use for this will not articulate to make a 2 90-degree turns and then head up the length of the pool. And it's not pipe, gentlemen, like sewer pipe that you can put a camera in that's round, that's got regular connected joints. These are rectangular squares that are welded together. So I can get it in 190 and I can get it down the length, but making another 90 and getting it up the other end of the pool, I would have to have a fully articulating borescope, and I don't have that capability at this particular time, and I don't know who does. And I would have to find somebody that would have that ability, and they're extremely expensive. So, to me,
Why don't you explain?
if you're asking my opinion, the best thing to do right now is your structure's already been subjected to salt water. Okay? It would be my opinion, let's get rid of the salt water and make sure there's no more salt water going into the structure. And then we just, see what it's going to take to replace the gutters and then budget for that further down the road.
Refresh my memory. Weren't you were here a year and a half ago? You guys came in here.
Yeah.
Did you suggest at that time to get rid of the salt water? I mean, that was our thing.
Yeah.
And what did we decide?
Yeah, but we've been chasing funds, so.
That was what it was, trying to find some funds for.
Yeah. Well, so I submitted an outside entity funding grant through NSCDC. The deadline was like January, but they didn't even consider it till late May. So that obviously was beyond the original expiration date of the original quote we got. And we all know in the last 3 or 4 months that things have gone up very, very significantly. And like Bob has alluded to, at that time, it's probably proved a little bit more costly because of, whatever major leak we had has now decided to work its way further up the gutter system.
Did NSCDC indicate they would help?
Yes.
Well, we were successful, but even though we were successful, it wasn't pretty much a blank check. The community of Nome only has a certain amount allocated to it, and we got the lion's share of it, but they did award some smaller stuff. Just
How much should they allocate?
This is a little bit more complicated. NSCDC gave us $100,000 out of our grant request. You have $240,000 that were not allocated, but there's a resolution in your packet tonight to start allocating that money. A year ago or 9 months ago, when we started talking about price, we were in the 370 range. Price has gone up. Other suggestions have been made with the staff. We're now at 481. Tonight I'm hearing there's more degradation going on. Coal has been up there because one of the things that as I said, we looked at, could Coal's crews handle some of this work? And it's just too much for them right now. And Coal was just pointing out something to me. Now, there's $340-some thousand, and SEDC funding that you have available. There's also some money that could come out of the reimbursement we're getting, where we've paid money to pay for the school bonds, and we're just getting reimbursed back. The issue is, and you're seeing now, the longer we wait, the worse the problem gets. The costs are going up astronomically. I know a little, I'm seeing some initial costs on what is going to cost us to fix our ventilation system, and I just about fell over from what we were estimating. So, time delaying is not on our favor. And I got to say, a lot of folks were, at the time when we were talking about this, were questioning whether the need to move from salt to chlorine because they really like the salt feeling. But as you've heard previously, salt is just eating the whole thing up, and it's just accelerating now, apparently. Because I didn't get a chance to talk to Bob since he's landed today.
If I may, gentlemen, Natari makes a, and I'd like to get you a price on the gutters. I don't want you to get overwhelmed by the gutters. Natari, which is a major stainless steel gutter manufacturer in Indianapolis, Indiana, who I'm a representative for, they make a gutter system that comes in panels that are welded together on site that we can actually do here and that's what I'm saying. We don't have to now excavate the entire deck out. All we have to do is cut the gutters out, and then we weld these panels together. And when we decide to execute on that, we ship them up on a barge up here to Nome, and they come on pallets already. The plates are already there. The gutter is continuous. All you have to do is weld the tabs together and the thing's in place. Now, Natari requires us to hire them to weld them up with their welders. But again, the price is really pretty reasonable when you consider what is involved with the gutter system. But I would like to get you some
reasonable.
Probably in the $250,000 $300,000 range. Okay, is what I think to be reasonable. Now, I grant you that's the last pricing I had on that. I would have to get you something new and current. But right now, to me, the biggest thing you need to do is get that salt out of that pool. We need to get the salt out of that pool. And then any fresh water that goes over the structure, it's not going to do any more damage than's already been done by the salt water, simply because of the fact that there's it might even because of the holes that are there, it may even flush some of the salt out, because we're now flushing fresh water through there instead of salt water into that structure. I mean, I don't think it's going to make the corrosion go away, but I'm just saying that it's not going to be still inundated with salt water.
But you're using table salt to
make sodium hypochlorite.
So the salt never touches. It's only
the only thing.
Salting.
The salt is in a brine tank. The brine goes into an electrolytic cell, which is similar to what's happening right now. Your brine tank is your swimming pool. Then it goes through an electrolytic cell, hit with high DC voltage, and then these titanium plates separate the brine solution into sodium hypochlorite and hydrogen. So you end up with a 12% bleach solution. Okay? And now we start metering in the bleach solution with a metering pump as the controller asks for it. However, we're going to put an ozone generator, which is going to have about the same electrical footprint as your UV lamp and your salt generators that you have right now. And that ozone generator is going to put ozone in the water, which is going to do the lion's share of the sanitation. Ozone wipes out everything. And it's the way to go.
So as far as timing is concerned, I mean, we're estimating 2 visits to Nome. One takes 7 days once the leak has been detected, and Lord knows how long that is going to take, because are we not looking for the leak because we're not going to get into the gutter thing at this point in time?
I'm going to be able to get in from the pump room and make a right-hand turn towards the first hole that I think is what's there.
Okay.
And I'm going to put my camera down there, and I'm going to use some special dyes, and I'm going to try to see if I can find it. Okay. If I'm unsuccessful at finding it when I go down there, then I can't make a left-hand turn and go up the length of the pool with that camera system. It's just not built for that. And so if I don't find it in that first 90-degree turn that I have to hit, then at that point, we're pretty much well done, and we need to move on to just getting the salt out of the pool with the rest of the system. What I'm suggesting is let's not spend the money on the leak detection and the excavation and the tile. Let's just go with the system the way it is, and then just let the leak continue to go until we get to the point where we have the resources to replace the gutters entirely. Because now you have another major leak on the far end of the pool that I don't know what's causing that. And so to excavate that entire deck, the entire length of that gutter, would be insanely. It would easily double this cost of 26, 12, and 10. So that's what 36, 46, $50,000. I mean, it would dwarf that to excavate that entire deck length all the way up the length of the pool to find that leak.
So I guess just trying to figure out how long is the pool closed. I mean, do you have that?
Like, how long is it gonna be closed once he starts the job, or?
Right. I mean, if we told them tonight to go ahead, it's more than 14 to 16 days because no materials are here.
I don't think he's proposing to like keep us closed. We're currently closed because we just don't have any senior guards that are available to guard. We did summer size through July, but we can reopen at any time once we get the staffing, and then shut down when Bob and his crew, put boots on the ground. But we don't need to be stay closed indefinitely.
We would go with this second bullet on page 2 that says second visit be to commence work for upgrading the piping, sanitation, automation system of the pool. And this work will require 14 to 16 days. Once we have the equipment on site, then that's what we're projecting to go ahead and complete the work inside the mechanical room. So we would be down for between 14 and 16 days.
John, we were trying not to impact on the swim team's efforts because it was originally planned to do this sometime in September, if I recall. And that would allow time for polar pools to mobilize. But the real impact at that point was on the swim team and their ability to have be ready for competitions.
And I don't think that'll affect the main swim team that you guys think of when you think of swim team. I think it probably more will affect the high school swim team because obviously the coach of the North Star swim team is also my lead guard. So, it's all about coordinating. I mean, would they like to swim year round? Yeah, but they'd also be fine to get things fixed and, get in early November or late October. I mean, they would like to do some, camps if they had the opportunity, but I think that they would probably sacrifice a little in the short term for having a pool in the long term.
Well, that's cool. Go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
Cole's got something for us.
Okay.
So on the gutters, describing where the leak is, Matt and I looked into it. The shape of the steel that we found on the plans is you have the swimming pools here where people would be. You have this tube, which is your pressurized tube, and then you have the gutter on this side where the water is coming back, and then it comes up and around. Where we're seeing the leak is right here. So the only way for that to make it to here is it has to be coming out the bottom of that tube, most likely that seam. And what Bob isn't saying is we're seeing it here. When we get the pool low enough and pressurize that pipe, we might also be seeing it here. And we can't really get to it because you have gussets and tie downs and everything, plus piping that comes over to the jets that are inside the. So there's a lot of stuff in there that's embedded in the concrete.
Okay, so we have 480,000 in round numbers on this, and then there's 50,000 in things we're not going to do, but that's only putting that off to doing it next year type of thing or somewhere else down the line.
I would encourage you to get it replaced in no later than 2 years, your gutter system. That would be my recommendation. I think if we get the salt out of there, we should be able to, and I guess it's a guess, gentlemen, I mean, I can't be absolutely accurate. The other thing is if you want to leave the leak detection in there, I'll give it my best shot and see if I can find it. If we can find it, then we'll excavate it up and see if we can weld it. But I can't guarantee that, gentlemen. I just have no way of guaranteeing that the weld is going to take or that we're going to find it in that place where Cole thinks it is, because I don't know. You know, I mean, I'll give it my best shot because I have some equipment that will at least. What I do is I put all the holes where the water comes out along the perimeter of the gutter. I plug those. I drop the water level down below the gutter, and then I actually put the entire gutter under vacuum. And then as I put it under vacuum, I go up on the deck with a weed sprayer with pool dye or water piping dye, and I spray it right on the deck. As my camera is looking inside the pipe under vacuum, any place that I see that dye coming through, and we put a little soap material in it where you see soap bubbles like you're testing for a gas leak on a pipeline. If I see any soap bubbles coming out of there, then I know that's exactly where it is. The head on the camera has a radio beacon that tells me exactly where it is in the deck, and I can excavate within that 2 foot by 2 foot area right straight down on it. But again, I can get in the pipe and I can get down to the end of the pool. I can't turn left and go back up the long end of the pool. So if it's within that first section and I can find it, well, then we'll at least get that leak taken care of. But now it's come, here's the pool here, okay? We're leaking here, and now we've got leaking up here, up 40 foot of it along this seam. So I don't know if this is a hole here that's pushing the water up the channel where the gutter meets the concrete, or this is another hole in itself. I don't know. And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And my pool camera comes in here, and I can get it to there, but I can't get it to turn the corner to come up here. Now, I've looked around Anchorage. No one has a borescope with an articulating head except the guy that does the sphygmoscopy scope up your hooter, okay? And so I can't find anybody that's got one of these, especially one that's going to go over almost 200 feet, okay? Because that's at least 75 feet that way, and then another, almost 100 feet up this way. So
this might be overthinking it, but why couldn't you just make a hole right in that corner so that you can look this way and look this way?
Now I'm boring a hole in the gutter, okay? And now I'm going to have to weld that hole back up shut again. I'm not sure if that's, with this age of stainless, if that's the way to go.
Just a
Plus,
question.
you can't get a vacuum anymore, can you, if you got a hole in it?
Well, no, I have to seal up the hole so I can pull a vacuum on it. So my vacuum's going to be pulled in the pump room. I have a test plug that I've rigged to where it'll allow the camera to go through, and I can hook my vacuum pump on it to where I can create a vacuum on this system. I understand what you're saying, sir, but I don't know if that would be possible.
No, I mean, it was just a what if, I guess.
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah.
How thick is it?
Well, it can be anywhere from an 8 to 3/16. It's usually not any thicker than 3/16 because they fabricate these, and the way they fabricate them, the way this grab a pin here, I'll show you all what it looks like. I'll pass it around to you. Thank you. The gutter actually is shaped like this, and I'll pass it around. This will be an end view of the gutter. Okay, so the gutter is.
Well, he's drawing. Does anybody remember the quote on the gutters when we talked about it the last time, which was, to me, it seemed like it was a big number.
Yeah.
And, that,
Well,
this other thing has gone up, but the gutters have gone down.
well, I think you were you were looking at something very inclusive the last time, and it was pushing the number well over $500,000, and we were trying to figure out, okay, what do we do as an interim? And right now, doing some quick calculations on if we, we separate the gutters out and we do some of this, you're still in the worst case scenario, $750,000 to $800,000. But I also know replacing that pool, it'll never happen. I don't know where the numbers come from. You're basically buying 10 to 12, 15 years of life for the pool.
Right.
So 750, 800,000, would that even cover everything? I mean,
Well,
because you've got to tear up the deck around the pool to be able to access the gutters, right?
well, that is that gentleman's job. What I'm just trying to figure out right now is, one is we have the money basically to pay $443,000 without impacting. 2 more years allows you to take the NSCDC funds, if they remain at that amount, to get ready for the second phase. Because when we've had all of this discussion, the NSCDC funds were really originally meant to do a lot of repairs on city structures. Then the city started allowing other community agencies to take advantage of it, and we were not addressing the pool, because a lot of that money at one time did go to the pool.
Yeah,
Everything did, yep.
And it's now just catching up to us. You got it into your budget, money for community agencies this year and last year, to start putting money against pool repairs.
What's catching up to us is the fact that at one time salt water seemed like the cat's meow because nobody liked chlorine.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Well, it was pitched in a way that made you think it was, very green and environmentally friendly, and that just has proven not to be the case. I don't want to badmouth our vendor, but I've had some experience with other people that have had experiences with these vendors, and the overwhelming sentiment is they're a hell of a salesman, but their product, and it's not a bad product if you're building a brand new pool, and you have the right piping and the right mechanical stuff in it. It's a great system. It's friendly. It's amazing on the bathers. Unfortunately, we don't have that type of system, and really they should have told us that when they sold it to whoever they sold it to, because really they gave pretty much a bad bill of goods. I mean,
When has salt been in the system? Just
2006 we installed it,
16 years.
and we're on our third cell.
Natari is one of the major pool manufacturers in the world. They will not warranty their stainless steel equipment if you've got a saltwater pool. They just won't do it. And they're doing it for a reason, because it just eats up everything. I have a client of mine that has a saltwater pool in his home up on the hillside in Anchorage, big pool, 33,000 gallons, okay? He has salt in it. He has 3 lights in the pool, and the middle stainless steel light, we couldn't keep the housings in it because it was eating it up, because you're filling your pool with an electrolyte. I don't know where that stray current corrosion is going to happen, but it's going to happen in that salt water. It just does. And so I've replaced his middle light at least 3 times before I finally talked him into getting rid of the salt water. And now we've got rid of the salt water, the corrosion's gone. It just is what it is. I mean, it finds its way where it's going. We even put zinc, like you do on the hull of your boat, we put zinc blocks in there, 3 of them. You even got one in your pool right now, in your mechanic room. It's just not enough to prevent that salt water from finding some place to create stray current corrosion. It just eats up everything.
So say, we're just having a little informal discussion here because we have a forum to start the meeting. This is Bob Walker with the pool company, and it's the last couple of pages in the packet. Essentially what we've heard is that we're on borrowed time, which we already knew before, and that it got worse because we didn't do anything 2 years ago, and that this proposal for about $500,000, and then there's been some possible takeoffs from it, would change the system away from the salt, but it doesn't solve our problems, and that we may, or we do likely need new gutters that could be in the neighborhood of $250,000 to $300,000. And so the recommendation that Bob was making was that we proceed with this accepting this proposal he has, which would change out the salt and quit that degradation, and then in a couple of years we could look at the gutter stuff. To me, it just seems like we got to do both. I just can't see the because I mean, if that water is escaping, and as you used the example of the Florida high rise that fell down because things were corroded in there. We don't know how corroded it is, but it'll only get worse. And that's an accurate statement? Likely?
Yes, sir. If you want to do this, I mean, unfortunately, I cannot guarantee the 481,000 price tag because we've already gone beyond the 21 days that I was able to guarantee that price tag, and I know that prices are still continuing to go up. However, if you want to table this for the time being and let me look at what a gutter replacement from Natari would be, I can certainly include that in there, but I can almost guarantee you this 481,000 is going to go up because I extended myself as far as I can with my subcontractors on their equipment and their pricing. And so I can't give you any more time on this number right here.
Okay, well, we can't accept it, so it's a dead bid.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, do you want him, I guess, because I feel like, the clock is ticking as we've all been hearing. Do you want him to submit a proposal to also address the guttering? Or do we want to, obviously there will be, I don't know how much of a price increase. I'm not even going to project that till we meet again on the 22nd of August, or do we want him to come back, if he can come back with a proposal by the 22nd of August, to really just go in and get it done instead of, because it's just eating, it's eating at us. It's cost every time we postpone. I think we all are seeing the number just goes up 5-10% at least. And I want to say also, there are also some other hazards, worker hazards in there too, Chip. The worker hazards in using the current materials we are using to maintain the salt levels. That I have some serious safety concerns for our staff. And that's one of the other reasons why we are moving away from the salt water, because we're making the pool do things it was never designed to do. In the studies we've seen, you guys, whoever was here was sold a bill of goods 16, 17 years ago. Because everything I've read, you never go and take a pool that has chlorine, switch it to salt water, because the piping is just going to be eaten alive. And, unfortunately, it sounded good, but in the long run was a decision that's come back. And now I don't want to tell Bob what I think the cost is, but he's got to come back and tell us or tell you in particular what we need to do, because I really don't think, you're pushing it to design failures now.
And I don't think, and actually Mark was next. Go ahead, Mark.
The contract for this, if we do this overall big job, are several things. Is it the same contractors, subcontractors you're using, or is there different?
No. I'm gonna have to find somebody to come in and cut those gutters out and deal with concrete on a commercial scale, not on a patch scale. So I have access to concrete people just as much as you have access to them here. And maybe one of your local contractors would be the one to reach out to as far as the concrete on that kind of a scale. Maybe Bering Sea or someone like that could be contracted with to do that work. But the gutters, the beauty of these gutters is we do not have to, again, this is relative. We're going to have to excavate as much concrete that's rotted out. So we know that we're going to have to do that. If the concrete is good where we cut the gutter off, we do not have to excavate any further into the concrete to get the gutter put in. There's only two pipes that feed the gutter, and they both come from the pump room. There's one for the gutter up here, one for the pool over here. So there's no piping beyond that right there. So the gutter is cut out, welded up, and then that rectangle is set into forms, okay? Now, gentlemen, I'll be absolutely honest with you. I'm going to have to rely on Atari to help me with that particular project because I don't do that kind of stuff. What I do is the mechanical end of this kind of pool industry, okay? Because I know more about the water molecule than a lot of other people do. But when it comes to digging holes and putting in concrete and rebar, gentlemen, that's not my forte. I would have to subcontract that out, and I'd have to find somebody that could get that work done. So I would not be able to give you a number by the 22nd of August as to what that's going to cost until I find out. And again, there would have to be a caveat on it that once we take the gutter out and expose that concrete, I don't know what's going to be required to get that concrete back up to spec so that it'll hold the gutter and still maintain the structure of the pool. I don't have those answers. I'm not wanting to lead you down a path I don't know anything about. I just know that it is degrading the concrete. To what extreme it is, I have no idea until the concrete people get in there and look at it. If it's in a perfect world, we would cut the gutter off, we put new gutters on, and away we go, and we keep the existing deck tile that's there. But I don't know if that's a realistic expectation, simply because I'm seeing so much degradation at the far end of the pool and now in this corner. Now, maybe Cole's right. Maybe it's Cole, correct? Maybe the hole is right there. We can get right to it and seal it up, and then this other leakage at the far end of the pool is migration. Do you believe that it's migration?
Yeah.
Neither do I, gentlemen. I don't want to lie to you. I don't know either. Okay, I'm seeing two distinct spots, one on one end of the pool and one on the other end of the pool, where I have a significant amount of salt water coming up out of the deck and pouring into the gutters, to where I have a solid stream of salt water coming out of the deck drain gutters down in the pump room. A solid stream of water on a 3-inch pipe. So there's a lot of water going through that deck. Okay, so where it's coming from or how degraded that is, I don't know. But I can certainly get with Natari. But then, just so we understand, everybody understands what we're dealing with here. I have another project up in Barrow that I had to bring Natari in on as well. We will have to pay to fly Natari up here to look at this project. It may require that. Okay, so there will be an expense that will be associated with this project that will have to be paid up front for me to get Natari up here to even look at it. And once they look at it, then I will get their answer as to what they can do or can't do and pricing. But again, prices have gone, I don't know. I gave you a ballpark, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if that ballpark is even realistic. Okay, I would like to get on the phone tomorrow morning and find out, and then I will call Glenn and let him know. Okay.
So I guess I don't know that I even want to ask you to repeat what you said with regard to the current state of the disinfection. But you indicated that the filtration that's ongoing now is dangerous.
The filtration is fine. It's the sanitizing equipment that you're using and the stuff you're dealing with. You've got ultraviolet radiation bulbs down there. You're using UV, and then you're using these big saltwater electrolytic cells for your creation of chlorine. You're also using muriatic acid to adjust your pH. And the one thing that you will retain, it will not be retained as equipment, but it'll be the same process. Is you will have to continue to use muriatic acid as your pH adjustment chemical. But as far as the amount of chlorine you're going to be using in your pool when you start using ozone is going to be negligible. And then you're going to create it on your own. So right now, the issues that are going on in your pool down there right now is you've just got saltwater contamination everywhere. I mean, it's literally everywhere, and it's eating through your pumps right as we speak. I mean, you've got one that's got a picture. It's not pretty. I mean, it's really bad.
So if the pool happened to be open right now, would you recommend we have a pool party?
No. In my honest opinion, I would not. And the reason I would not is because you have no true sanitation going on. You have no water going over the lip of the gutter. That means all the debris that's in that pool is staying in the pool for all intents and purposes. You have two small main drains at the bottom of the deep end that are trying to turn that entire pool over and get it through the filtration system, get it sanitized, and get it back into the pool. That is not the way the pool is designed. The gutter is what does the cleaning. It takes the water out of the pool, off the surface, and then through the filtration system, through the sanitation system, and back to the pool. So I would say, no, I would not recommend that you have a pool party in its current condition.
I was afraid that's what you had said.
I wouldn't. You're a commercial pool. You have people in there, and those people have got body fluids and stuff that they bring with them. A swimming pool is a bathtub you share with all your neighbors, and you never drain it. And I say, gentlemen, that's
Except
exactly what it is.
Except every 3 years we drain.
Yeah, but not because of that.
Because of this.
So expanding on that, okay, and I was going to ask this earlier because I remembered you basically started the presentation by saying that the contaminants are in the top 2 feet, and it's mainly the gutter system that cleans things. It's not the drains in the bottom, et cetera, et cetera. So if we did all this other work, the $500,000, that excludes the gutters, does that even address that issue at all?
We will now fill the pool up to where the gutters are functional, but you're going to continue to lose water out of the structure.
But it'll filter.
But well, you're going to lose water because you have a hole in the gutter system somewhere.
Right.
But by filling the gutters back up to the place where they flow properly, now you're going to get the debris that's coming off of the human bodies back into the system and properly sanitized.
It's not filled now?
No, sir, it's not.
Because of the leaks.
Yeah, it's down below the gutters by almost 4 inches.
Well, I was going to say that. I was going to let you know we actually backwashed it several times in an effort to find those drains that you wanted us to find. So it hasn't been that low all summer. It is really low right now, but we're in the process of refilling it up.
Okay, well, as long as the water is over the lip of the gutter all the way around, then you're getting sanitation.
Yeah, we can keep that level of water. I'll just have to keep the hose on. But yeah, no, it is much lower than normal. And that Bob and I didn't get a chance really to talk either. But yeah, that's because like I said, we were doing some sleuthing last week and anyway. So yeah, so I think we could keep it to the point where we could get the gutters to do most of their job, and that's to collect that water that comes in with. Get bather loads, the water goes in, that's what's collected, that's what goes down, it's strained, it's filtered, it's strained, it's sanitized, and
just so you know, what they were doing.
He didn't go back up.
The drainage fields, because no one really knew or remembered
Yeah.
where they were. And one of the things is occasionally they have to be cleaned, jetted. And that was one of the issues that Bob had brought up. So the effort was last week was to find those drainage fields, so to see what if there was a problem there. So, and that's why I was surprised, when Bob was just saying the water's not reaching the gutters because, but Bob didn't know what we were trying to do last week. Cole and his staff have been out there.
Yeah.
We kept trying to figure this out. There's a lot of pieces, as you're now hearing, are part of this puzzle. So if I'm hearing Bob correctly, because I'm just getting a hell of a headache right now.
I'm sorry.
I'm just, it's money. That's what I'm just, right now, I'm understanding where the mayor's coming from. How far do we get into this without finding another big bill? How do we get the pool house, the pool pumps and all that operating more safely? And there's other concerns that I have from a manpower situation back in those places. Without putting $400 and some thousand in, then we find out there's another $500,000 bill outside of it. And then we also have there are a number of people who do use that pool as a source of exercise and calming and everything else that goes with it. I think I know someone sitting right next to me. And then, of course, we have the swim teams there. I really can find enough money for you to do the first phase. And, then we'll know what the second phase will look like. But, I think what the mayor's concerned is it's going to be.
I don't think any of us are looking to close the pool and trying to figure out any way to possibly keep it open.
Oh, I'm not saying that, sir. I agree. I think you want to keep the pool open.
And I guess my thought is that, if we had addressed this 2 years ago, we would have been talking about gutters tonight as opposed to salt systems. And that if we, not wait 2 years to talk about the gutters again, I think we ought to, and we don't need it before we necessarily proceed with this, but I think we ought to be getting that information, that quotation and that. And, it might be that we just have to bite the bullet next budgetary cycle and, look at, Cole got lots of equipment this year, so maybe we'll get a pool next year.
Cole's watching his equipment request just go.
I hope you've sent those POs already. So. Yeah, take it back.
If I may, I would like to see you save. And I probably shouldn't be saying this, but I don't want you to spend money good money after bad. Okay, don't get me wrong. I would love to be able to come in and find the leak and seal it up. But because we found this other area of degradation, let's save the $60,000 here and put it towards your new gutters, and just let the water flow into the structure that's clean and free of salt. And then we address this in a year or 2 years, and I'll get you some budgetary numbers that you can look at and make an informed decision on, and then get the gutters replaced at that time. That's my recommendation. Save the $60,000. Let's put it towards the new gutters. Even if I weld it up, there's no guarantee that it's not going to crack someplace else. They're old. They've been in there since '81. They're pretty much shot. So let's save that $60,000 and let's put that money into, getting the new gutters at a later date, and let's get out of that salt water and stop the degradation as much as humanly possible that's going on in that room. You're going to be so impressed with ozone, it's not even going to be funny. You're going to love it. That pool is going to look absolutely crystal clear, as if you were drawing water out of your drinking water tap. It literally destroys everything. Cryptosporidium, every disease known to man. It is It is the best material for cleaning a swimming pool in the world. And the bottom line is it's the primary sanitizer. So the chlorine you're going to be using in your Myox system is only going to be put in there so that we recreate a chlorine residual that we know will do sanitation in case there's debris that gets off a human being. But otherwise, the lion's share of your cleaning is going to be done with that ozone, and it literally destroys everything. It's like running your hand through a shredder. I mean, it just destroys organic material on contact. It destroys it so well that we have to off gas it through a canister to get the ozone out of it before the water goes back to the pool. But it is.
This is a new thing for pools, or this ozone thing is a new thing for pools?
It's a new thing for pools, but they've been using it in the water industry for years. In the drinking water industry, for example, in the island of Aruba, that's all they use is ozone. But see, it doesn't leave you a residual. Ozone does not have a residual once it does its job. And that's why chlorine and bromine have been in this industry for so long, is because you can measure it. You can have the pool operator do a colorimeter test and measure it. So what they do to measure ozone is they use a method called oxidation reduction potential, ORP. So that's how they determine that you have the right amount of ozone in your pool. We also use, in these ozone generators, it's best to use purified oxygen. So we have oxygen generators that are built into them that actually purify the atmospheric air to a more pure state of oxygen, so that the corona discharge in the ozone generator will create a purer form of ozone. And
You gonna be ready for your quiz? Get all that?
yeah, I don't want to blow you away with the science of it, but it's very remarkable, and it like I said, it does an unbelievable job. I've got it in several of my residential clients' pools. They just love it, and they don't even put chlorine in their pool. There's no reason to. I mean, it just keeps them that clean. So the beauty of it is it will remove everything. There is not a human being in this room that hasn't gotten in the pool and peed in the pool. Okay, well, guess what? Ozone wipes it all out, all of it, destroys all of it. That's the beauty of it. It removes any organic material that's in there. It removes chloramines.
It doesn't remove any good stuff. Right.
Well, it's doing its good stuff because, as I said, you're bathing with several of your friends and you're not changing the bath water.
So this number that's here, that if we had accepted it today, would have been acceptable. And then with the suggested subtractions from it, bringing it down to like 440.
443, I'm more comfortable with that.
Yeah. How much money do you have, Glenn?
Well, we have $341,000 available at NSEDC funds, and the city just received our first reimbursement for school bond payments that you've been paying out, and I believe that's in the neighborhood of $125,000. So, I mean, if you all could meet, this is a special meeting, and just approve that, or we go and have possibly a full meeting on next Monday night and try to catch up. But, unfortunately, I think being Monday was the first, people are not thinking of today as the second Monday of the month. And there are 5 Mondays in this month. So, it's up to you. I mean, I'm hoping the price is not going to be that substantially different if we met on Thursday, if that was possible.
Bob's sharpening his pencil right now as we speak.
I'm going to be on the phone with my vendors tomorrow morning, okay? And I will get some sort of answer as to what I'm looking at, because I was told them that I would give Glenn till the 8th, which was today. And I know you guys can't make a decision today, so I'm going to ask my vendors, what am I looking at, okay? And how much of an increase am I looking at if we postpone till when to get an answer? What are we looking at now?
We can do it as Thursday, I think, Brian, right?
Let me check the calendar real quick.
Tell your vendors we really want to do it, but we only have so much money, and if we don't get underneath that money, we're not going to do it.
Well, and I understand that, and I really want you guys to get this. I really do.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna do everything I can to convince them to wait, but I don't know what your timeline is. How long are you asking me to wait till?
Well, Brian is saying that technically, and I only went as far as saying this meeting is rescheduled to, and then I didn't put a date out there. So we can do it Wednesday if people can meet Wednesday.
My question is, do you want to do a full-blown meeting, or you just want to address this one issue?
Why don't we just clear the deck here as long as we're together? I mean, there's not much on there.
I'm just.
Wednesday night.
Yeah, I mean, rather than I mean, if we could muster the quorum, that'd be great, and just do this. We might have problems later in the month for all we know, so.
Yeah, I know Wednesday, if you get quorum, fine, that's fine with
I
me.
can do Wednesday.
I can't do Wednesday, so. But if you get somebody else to place it.
Adam won't be here until next Monday.
Okay.
Time, regular, 7 o'clock?
Right after work.
Well, what time does it have to work for you?
I'm gonna bring the town leaving Thursday, we're gonna do dinner Wednesday.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, how about Thursday then?
I'm in Juneau.
Okay.
Or we could do a special meeting Wednesday at noon.
I mean, I can make Wednesday work.
Okay. Could we do Wednesday noon?
And then just the one topic probably.
Yes, I would recommend.
That'll drag out. We don't get over it.
Well, I hope we're not going to. What are you looking at me for? I'm not going to even say it.
Just for that.
All of this again. I hope we won't. That we'll remember some of what we said.
No, I'm pretty clear on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if you're gonna, I didn't mean to interrupt, Mayor, but
Yeah.
if you're gonna meet at lunchtime, I would say my recommendation would be to limit this because,
Okay.
we're just trying to get people together.
Yeah. We're taking. Yeah.
I
Okay.
can do Wednesday at noon.
Okay. Let's do Wednesday at noon. Special meeting, and this one is just canceled. Or what happens, Brian, because you got second reading?
It just.
It just goes to the next.
meeting,
Okay.
We probably will, I will say we'll probably put on, the resolution for the money, or we can wait for that. You've got the money.
I guess they're kind of tied together. But if it's gonna slow things down, we'll
You
just.
mean you'll put the resolution on Wednesday?
Yeah, for the money. That'll make Nikki happy. Nikki's on vacation this week. She was gonna call in and I told her.
Go ahead.
So, not realizing we're gonna have this.
Well, let's go ahead and not have the money thing. Let's just have the deal, because then, let's take the CDS thing up in a regular meeting.
We're gonna wait for Bob to get back with us, make see if the number that he gave us tonight is gonna change. We're pushing it back a few days, right?
Yep.
And then we're gonna decide whether we're gonna spend that or not.
Right. Okay, Wednesday noon. So we'll need some kind of an answer. When can you get that to Glenn?
I am going to, get on the phone tomorrow morning. I fly back on the first flight in the morning, so when I get back to my office, I'm going to get the consensus from my vendors. One of them is in Florida, so I can call him first thing tomorrow morning at 5 a.m.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna get the other two vendors to give me their, the other three, actually, there's four vendors here. There's the pump company, there's the SCADA company, there's the ozone manufacturer, and the chlorine manufacturer. I'll get all those four people on the phone, get their consensus on the pricing they've given me so far. And then I hopefully by Tuesday afternoon or evening, in Glenn's box will be either the proposal reduced by these three numbers here, or whatever adjustment needs to be made from my other subcontractors, and have it in your hands before Wednesday morning. Okay?
Yeah, and just to confirm, he asked me that he's supposed to strike the the gutter related items in this proposal off the list for the updated proposal that he's
At this
going.
point.
Yes.
Yes.
But we want to follow up with.
Yeah, no, yeah, we're
Right.
not, yeah.
I will get I won't be able to do it till Thursday, but Thursday I will get Natari on the phone and I will find out, I'll give him the dimensions of the pool and ask him for a ballpark number, an ROM, a rough order of magnitude. And then, if that rough order of magnitude fits within your, budgetary planning, then we'll fly the Natari guy up here and have him actually physically look at the pool and see what it's gonna take to do it. Is there anybody here in Nome that does concrete work that you guys feel are up for the task?
Yep. We got a concrete guy here.
Yep.
One concrete guy.
Because I'd like to keep that work local if I can. Because I don't.
Yeah, you're not bringing concrete in.
No, I'm not. No. So if there's somebody that does concrete work
Unless you're
here,
paying the port tariffs out of your profits, then go right ahead.
that's fine.
What's that?
He doesn't understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, 2 foot by 2 foot section of concrete, my plumber would take care of. But if we're starting talking, feet of concrete, none of us are up for that. So do you have a vendor you can give me their name?
We can,
Yes, Q Trucking.
he doesn't do concrete work, he'll only deliver it. Maybe Randy, maybe ESDC.
Is there a construction
There's
company?
somebody in
that does
town
concrete?
somewhere that will do it.
We'll, I think we're gonna have these two guys, Chip and Cole,
Loop around.
work on that and get you some
We've
answers.
got a guy that'll procure concrete and deliver concrete. We just need a guy that takes it from that point on. Or
Well,
company.
you know, and I mean, maybe it's bringing up a finisher, you know, I
Yeah.
mean.
Line Mason up or something.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
BSDC's done lots of concrete.
Do they have somebody in-house or do they have?
They used to. I don't know if they still
Okay,
do.
or they got someone down in.
Well, we certainly can cross that bridge when we get to it.
I'm sure it's bear season.
I mean, they've got the equipment to
Well,
do
and
the
you know,
rebar,
Conrad's may be able to do it too.
make the forms and all that
Done
stuff.
plenty of concrete.
I just don't know if they've got people with actual expertise on payroll.
Okay, let's get out of here.
What fluid?
I
Thank you for,
did not even see the time.
yeah, no worries. Thank you for, getting here so you have a good idea of what we're talking about for.
Yeah, and I'll go back and review everything and watch the, was this recorded?
It's on YouTube.
Okay.
Yes,
I'll go back and watch it.
yeah, okay. Skip the first part.
Yeah, you missed the fun part.
Oh, no.
Oh,
All good.
Unless I have not done grades, am I in really big trouble?
I was looking at that today, and
Oh,
I was thinking, well, I don't have another response to this email, 'cause I just went back on contract today.
okay. Yeah,
I thought maybe you did it online or something.
I haven't done them. I meant to do them and then we left for one kayak trip, came back for a couple days, left for another. I